James Carlyle turned on the light and closed the door behind him. Suddenly, he felt tired, which was impossible to describe in words. He tossed his winter coat onto the floor and slouched towards the bedroom. On each pillow was a god of a chocolate bar. In the center of the bed was a set of linen that he had never seen before. Dark blue, darker than her dress, with black lace around the edges. In his imagination, he saw her trying it on, with that mixture of love and sensuality in her eyes that was only hers, which belonged only to him until tonight. He took the delicate lace items into his hands, as if hoping that this would bring her back to him. It didn't work. He began to cry. His wife, his lover, his best friend was taken from him by another man. Mark easily and naturally snatched it right from under his nose, as if he had every right to do so. He didn't care what she meant to Jim. All he saw in her was a beautiful toy for one night, and she just let him do it. Jim wasn't important enough to her to even try to resist. She also seemed to believe that Mark had more rights to her than Jim, who had earned them through almost 10 years of loyalty and love. Yes, it was only supposed to be one night, and probably still in the morning. So what? And what will remain in her heart, mind, and feelings after Mark and this night? What would Jim do to compare, let alone compete, with the town hero, the handsome macho man, Mark Lavaliere? Somehow Jim dozed off. When he woke up, it was almost 1 in the morning. He sat bent over the bed with a pain in his back and a set of underwear soaked in tears in his hands. He looked around the room. Thinking about what they had planned for this evening, he realized that he couldn't sleep here. Go home to their bed? No, it's even worse. Rent another hotel room. This is stupid, he already paid for one. Maybe go to one of the children's rooms. It might work. He packed his suitcases again, hers and his. I ate both chocolates, why waste the goodness? And threw the wet set of underwear into the trash can. Without Linda, they were empty and useless, just like their special evening. He checked out of the hotel. Let Linda and Mark figure out how she can get home. She probably won't be back before eviction time anyway. The young woman at the reception, with a professional smile, asked with concern if their room was disappointing. Jim looked at her for a moment, trying to understand her question, and then realized that couples who rent such rooms usually stay until the last minute. No, the room was excellent. Everything just changed. Oh, I'm so sorry, she replied. Her professional smile returned as soon as she realized it wasn't the hotel. Apparently, she had seen this more than once. It didn't bother her too much. Their small starter home had no guest room, not even a sofa big enough to lie on. So this is Tommy's room. He sat down on Tommy's bed and began planning what he needed to do. He had no idea when his unfaithful wife would return home. Obviously, she was too busy with Mark to text or call. He figured she wouldn't show up until midday, which would give him plenty of time to pack for a week or more and leave before she arrived. On Monday, he will find a lawyer and begin the divorce. Again, to his surprise, he fell asleep, this time without dreams. But not for long. The sound of knocking woke him up. He sat down, not immediately realizing where he was, and then remembered that he was in his son's room. Memories came flooding back, and it took a lot of effort not to scream. The knocking was repeated, this time with a loud voice, and he realized that the sound was coming from the front door. He looked at the cartoon wall clock in Tommy's room and saw that it was just after 2:30. Is this really Linda? No, the voice was too masculine. It occurred to him that it might be this bastard who had come to collect his new woman's belongings in order to take her to his place as a permanent sex toy. Perhaps she stood next to him while he knocked on the door. Well, it didn't matter, Jim thought. It's all over with her. The knocking resumed. Why doesn't this bitch just use her keys? He went downstairs to open the door. Even before he did it, he realized that it was not Mark Lavaliere on the other side of the door. The voice was too official, and the light of the flashlight penetrating through the glass spoke of something else. Good morning, officer, Jim said. What's the matter? A male policeman, clearly over 6 feet tall, and apparently the one knocking and shouting, spoke up. Good morning, sir. Are you James Carlyle, Linda Carlyle's husband? Not for long, Jim snapped. We're getting divorced. The two policemen looked at each other, tense. What's happening? Jim was surprised. The officer talking to him stepped back to give himself more space, perhaps in order to have time to pull out a weapon if necessary. His badge read L. Amos. The second policewoman, a short Asian woman, was not so restrained and pulled out a stun gun. Her badge read V. Nguyen. Jim kept his hands open and visible. Just to clarify, sir, Nguyen asked, are you James Carlyle? Yes. And Linda Carlyle, your wife? It was painful, but he answered. Yes, but only on paper, and it won't last long. We're done. We're sorry to hear it, Mr. Carlyle, the senior officer, Amos, uttered carefully. But you're still her closest relative. Jim felt his heart clench at the meaning of these words. He spent the whole way home wishing his wife and her lover the most painful deaths. But when faced with reality, he realized that he did not hate his cheating wife as much as he thought. What's happened? He asked, thinking about how to tell the children about this. She had an accident, sir, Amos said. She was badly hurt. Fine. It was amazing how the hatred returned as soon as he found out that she was alive. Where is she? She's at St. Martin's, Amos said. We came earlier, but your car was not there, and no one was home. The implicit question was obvious. Where have you been? We're staying at the Elysium Hotel, Jim said. We checked out at 1:15, got home around 1:45, fell asleep. I haven't seen Linda since 11. They looked confused, and rightly so, he thought. His world turned upside down in just 20 minutes. It's only fair that they felt at least some of it. This is all? He asked. Nguyen looked shocked. So you won't even check if she's okay? She's still in surgery. Jim shrugged. I guess I don't care, officer, he said. The anger returned with renewed vigor. If that's all, I'll go to bed. Thanks for letting me know. How can you be so heartless? Nguyen clenched her fists. She's the mother of your children. It was as if this cheating prostitute, his future ex-wife, cared about them by running off with this scoundrel. Ma'am, Jim said, they're the only reason I'm not dancing for joy right now. The only reason I don't go to St. Martin's is to watch her suffer. So I do the best I can and go to bed. The look of disgust on Officer Nguyen's face did not move him. Good night, sir, Amos said finally, with a stony expression on his face. And to you, officers. Amos was about to leave when an idea occurred to Jim. Was this bastard with her? Asked Jim. Amos turned around, frowning. Who? The bastard she left me with to have sex in front of our so-called friends, Jim explained. Mark Lavalier. Amos looked at him. So does Nguyen. Shark's tight end, Jim clarified. Local hero. I know who he is, Amos said. Was he hurt too? The officers looked at each other again. I think you'd better come with us, Mr. Carlyle, said Amos. Officers Amos and Nguyen assured him that he was not a suspect and did not have to come with them to the station. He was not arrested. They promised to take him there and back or leave him wherever he wanted. They picked up him, refusing to say more about Lavalier, only saying that he was picked up almost 2 miles from where Linda was. Knowing that he wouldn't sleep if he refused, Jim followed them to the station. Keeping their word, they did not handcuff him as a suspect. He got into the back seat and Nguyen took the wheel. It all seemed surreal. The difference between how he had imagined this evening and the twisted reality. His wife, whom he loved and trusted without a shadow of a doubt, humiliated him by leaving for another man. The fact that this man turned out to be Mark Lavalier and his so-called friends not only considered this normal, but also contributed to it in every possible way, only added to the strangeness. This meant that he was friends with people and married to a woman with a completely different moral system. Now she's been in an accident, in surgery, and he's being taken to the police station because the man she ran off with somehow got hurt too, but ended up 2 miles away. When they arrived at the station, he was politely shown into a room with a table and chair, with the promise that the detective would be there shortly. Amos asked if he wanted some coffee while he waited. Yes, Jim answered in surprise. Black, cream, sugar, Nguyen clarified. Black, with sugar. Nguyen left and returned with a mug and 3 packets of sugar. Then she went out again, this time with Amos. 5 minutes later, an elderly African-American man entered the room with a sullen face and a folder in his hands. He put the recorder on the table and pressed the button. The indicator lit up. I'm Detective Sergeant George Holden, he introduced himself, sitting down on the chair opposite. First of all, I want to make it clear that you are not a suspect and have not been arrested. You can leave at any time. You are only here to help us clarify what happened last night between 10:30 and 11:15 p.m. The timeline suggested that they never made it to the place where Linda was supposed to spend her special night with Mark Lavalier. In his heart, he was triumphant. George Holden continued, If you want a lawyer present, we can reschedule and you can come back in the afternoon with your lawyer. Fine. Got it, Jim said. Continue. Great. Holden looked and sounded delighted. For the record, are you James Carlyle, husband of Linda Carlyle? Yes, he said, but I'm filing for divorce in the morning. Our marriage is over. Is this connected with Mark Lavalier? Yes. Jim decided to lay everything out right away. We stayed at the Elysium Hotel for the night. But first we went to Morrison's for dinner with our so-called friends. Then this bastard appeared. Who? George tapped the recorder. Mark Lavalier came to our table, and asked my wife to dance. She danced with him a little, then returned to the table, and then followed her friend deep into the toilet. Jim clenched his fists. It turned out it was just a cover to run away and spend the night with him. Her friend Dee said it was an opportunity she couldn't pass up, that it was something she had to do. Jim leaned back. It was about 10:30 p.m. I haven't seen her since then. I returned to the hotel, slept until 1 in the morning, checked out, and went home. I'm going to call my lawyer tomorrow morning. George Holden had an amazing ability to keep a straight face. Do you know Ellen Jordan? Holden asked. This question was completely different from what Jim expected to hear after his story. No. I can show you her photo from the file. It was truly a surreal night. Fine. Holden opened the folder and handed him an enlarged photograph from the dossier. The woman in the photo looked as if she had survived a debilitating illness. Her eyes were sunken, empty, and red. Her hair was dull and clearly unwashed. The expression on her face was so hopeless and desperate that Jim turned pale. No, said Jim. Her name used to be Ellen Hendrickson. And then Jim looked at her, saw the resemblance. This was although it is already obvious that she is no longer the beautiful and cheerful wife of Carl Hendrickson. Their 3 children attended the same school as Emma and Tommy, but in different classes. Carl adored her. Therefore, the news about their divorce and Carl's move was unexpected. They weren't close, so Jim didn't ask questions. Since then, Carl began to appear rarely, and he had not seen Ellen for more than a year. How is she connected to all this? What the hell happened to her? Oh my God, Jim exclaimed. I know her. What happened to her? Is she sick? I haven't seen her for a long time. Have you spoken to her recently? Holden clarified. Today? By phone? In the chat? By email? SMS? By any means? No, I don't really know her. I only knew her husband, her ex-husband Carl, from the gym, and that's not very good. Jim was completely confused. What's going on here? George Holden was silent for a long time, thinking about something. He then leaned forward and pressed a button on the recorder, turning off the recording. We're speaking informally now, Holden said. Will this suit you? Jim nodded. Yes. According to Link and Van, began Holden. Jim frowned. Who? Lincoln Amos and Vanessa Nguyen, the officers who brought you here, Holden explained. According to them, you were not at all interested in the condition of your wife or the circumstances of her accident. I wasn't interested then, Jim admitted. I think now it still gets to me. I'm curious. Given your story, that's understandable, Holden agreed. Then he added, "She's still in surgery, by the way. Doctors say it will take time." It was a blow to the heart. What's happened? She was hit by two cars. The first one hit her on the head, the second one ran over her. Jim's jaw dropped. What the hell is this? It seemed like this night couldn't get any weirder, but it was like she decided to slap him in the face. He felt a heaviness in his chest, so strong that he could barely breathe. Where, where, where was he? Jim asked, stuttering. Why did Lavalier do such a thing? That's the point, Mr. Carlyle, Holden said. We don't know how Lavalier is connected to this. I don't understand. Jim was shaking. Didn't he get hurt too? Holden thought for a moment, looking at Jim appraisingly again. Then he sighed. This should be confidential, but I think I'll tell you anyway, because tomorrow morning the whole country will know about it anyway. Jim Carlyle was shocked to see her. So pale, so covered in bruises, so broken. He was even more amazed by how much his heart sank at this sight. Her face was almost as white as the sheets, except for a dark bruise spreading across her left temple. A series of neat black stitches disappeared into her hair, where a wound on her scalp had been stitched. He hated her, didn't he? She may not have gotten to spend the night with Marc Lavalier as she had planned, but she was going to do it. She deceived him and ran away in a car with another man, fully intending to let him into her body. He should have hated her. But he loved this woman with all his heart for more than 10 years. And even though she ruined it all, spat on it, and trampled on their relationship for the sake of one night with another, she was still the mother of his children. Even if not for the sake of the children, even after she had torn out his heart and trampled on it, he knew now that he would never want to see her in this state. Unaware of the final stages of their marriage, the emergency room doctor gave him the details. The blow to the head from the truck side mirror knocked her unconscious, but did not cause serious damage. The mirror collapsed on impact, causing a mild concussion and a laceration of the scalp, causing the wound to bleed profusely, as is often the case with head injuries. It was the car that ran over her that caused the main damage. The operation lasted 7 hours. Fortunately, the driver managed to swerve, avoiding being hit in the head and torso. But her legs were less fortunate. Multiple fractures of the femur, tibia, and fibula of both legs. 2 teams of surgeons took turns repairing damaged blood vessels, collecting bones, and literally putting her legs back together. She will have scars, the doctor said, smiling encouragingly. But thanks to our new techniques, they will be subtle and minimal. By next summer, or at most the next one after that, she will be ready for the beach season. I see, Jim replied. Yes, the doctor looked a little puzzled by the lack of enthusiasm. She's very lucky. No serious nerve or vascular damage despite all this. She will need physical therapy, but by July, or August at most, she will be able to regain 100% of her function. She provided additional information before leaving, and Jim asked her to convey his gratitude to the surgeons and nurses for saving his wife's life. He called a shocked Mrs. Porter to tell her that Linda had been in a car accident without going into detail. Mrs. Porter would, of course, wonder why he hadn't been in the same accident, but he had his own questions and decisions to consider. The rhythmic beeping of monitors filled the sterile air. Various tubes and wires connected her to the machines around the bed. There were several bags hanging on the Roman IV stand, their contents dripping steadily into her hand. The nasal cannulas supplying oxygen seemed almost fragile compared to the heavy bandages and metal structures that framed both of her legs, slightly elevated on pillows. Her hands lay limp on the blanket, her wedding ring removed for surgery. She looked small and fragile in that hospital bed, as if diminished, her energy gone, leaving a vulnerability that saddened him to the core. But what really broke his heart was that the last time he saw her, she was dazzling in that blue dress. Then she lied to him in order to secretly go to bed with Marc Lavalier. He sat outside the room to wait. It would be some time before she came to her senses, and he wanted to make sure that she was okay, that she would hear and understand what he had to say before he returned to the children. Their lives would change, and his heart broke again. He wished with all his heart that things were different, that he could turn back time. Before leaving the room, he looked at his wife again, remembering her as he thought she was before he was faced with the cruel reality that in 10 years of loving her, he never knew the real her, what she was capable of, how little she valued him. The fact that her planned night of passion with another man never materialized was immaterial. Perhaps it was karma or nemesis deciding to strike preemptively. But the scale, the audacity of this betrayal was impossible to ignore. Forgive. He went to the toilet and locked himself in the stall, and he cried, mourning the death of the illusion that had fed him for so long, mourning the fact that it was just an illusion. When he came out, he saw a nurse standing where he had just been sitting, looking around with concern. Seeing him, she ran up. "She's coming to her senses," she said. "You need to come in." Her eyes were open but clouded with confusion as she tried to focus. Her throat twitched reflexively, and panic flashed across her face when the sounds did not appear. On the monitor, her heartbeat suddenly accelerated, activating an alarm. One of the nurses quickly and calmly turned off the bright overhead light, while the other walked over to Linda, checking her vital signs. "Miss Marshall, you are in the hospital. Everything is fine, but you won't be able to speak yet. This is normal after long operations. This is temporary," the head nurse explained gently but professionally. She showed a thumbs-up gesture. "Can you do this?" Linda's hand shook as she tried to repeat the movement, barely able to bend her thumb. The nurse smiled. "Great. The doctor will be here soon." She turned slightly, noticing Jim, still frozen in the doorway. "Your husband is here." When Linda's eyes found him, the heart monitor began to beep even faster, and tears streamed down her temples and into her hair. Fine, he thought. She understood. He walked in and stood to the side so as not to interfere when the doctor on duty came and agreed with the nurses that her vital signs were normal. In a firm but soft voice, he explained that she had been in an accident, broken both legs, and received a wound on her head. He said she had surgery, that there was no permanent damage, and that she would make a full recovery with only minor scars. He told her that her vocal cords were temporarily paralyzed, and that this was a common side effect of intubation after a long operation. "You're in excellent hands, miss." He glanced at the map. "Marshall, we will take good care of you." Jim saw Linda's eyes open wide and her mouth open, but no sound came. The heart monitor beeped faster again. "Everything is fine, Miss Marshall," the doctor reassured, misinterpreting the cause of the patient's anxiety and only intensifying it. "Your voice will return in a few hours, and you will soon be able to move. This is just the effect of anesthesia. You will be fine." He quickly left. The junior nurse frowned at the rapidly flashing monitor and noticed that Linda's eyes were glued to her husband. "Sir," she said, "why don't you hold her hand?" Jim walked over to the bed and took Linda's hand. The monitor's beating slowed immediately, her eyes following him as her fingers curled weakly around his arm. Linda tried to smile. The nurses smiled back. "She's still very weak," the head nurse said. "She needs to rest a little more, but we can leave you alone for 5 minutes." "Good night, Miss Marshall." The junior nurse said goodbye as she left the room. The beating of the monitor became faster again. Left alone, Jim stopped smiling. His face, previously friendly to the nurses, darkened. He removed his hand from Linda's. "I'm really glad you're going to be okay, Linda," Jim said. "I still love you enough to not want you to hurt." He paused. "I'm not sure if I can say the same about your opportunity, Mark Lavalier." Linda's mouth dropped open. Jim shook his head. "You probably want to know where he is and if he's okay. You must be very worried about him." His voice became colder. "Well, you'll have to find out for yourself." Linda's head turned in his direction, her eyes full of tears fixed on him. The mouth opened slightly again. "The irony," Jim continued, "is that they gave me your rings while you were in surgery. It was like they knew it was over between us." He took the rings out of his pocket. 3 rings. 2 small ones are for a woman, and one much larger one is for a man. Her eyes widened because his left arm was bare. I asked you to return your surname Marshall. His voice trembled treacherously. Said that's your professional name. I wanted to say Lavaliere, but I knew it would be petty, childish. He looked at her, seeing tears streaming down her cheeks, her head shaking, her mouth opening over and over as if she was trying to say something. But there was nothing she could say that would change what he was going to say and what he was going to do. He cried too. Never, he said, not in a million years would I have believed that you were capable of what you did, that you could so cruelly, ruthlessly, and openly choose another man over me, instead of our family, instead of what we had. He took a deep breath. Or maybe it was just me who thought we had something wonderful, something special. In fact, I know this now. It was just me. You really deceived me, Linda. I loved you with everything I had. Everyone. I didn't keep anything to myself. But it turned out that this was not enough. Our children were not enough. Our home was not enough. 10 years of loving you and only you was not enough. Linda's head was still shaking negatively. Her mouth was open, her eyes full of tears were pleading, desperate. He started crying again. All it took was some damn famous athlete to pay attention to you and take a step towards you, and you immediately lost your temper. I was there. You weren't drunk. He didn't drug you. You made every choice fully, consciously. Told my friend to tell me you love me while leaving to fulfill her fantasy of sleeping with another man. You thought it was normal because it was just one night? Because he's famous? Because he's a hot athlete? Jim looked at her in disbelief. How could you think that I would accept this, that you allowed another man to be in your body for even 1 second? Let alone plan, conspire, and actually run away during our date to spend the night with him. I don't care if he was the richest, beefiest, biggest fucking champion of the world in sex. Whether it was the crown of England or some pathetic bastard like Marc Lavaliere, I would never have thought that you could have done what you did to me. With us. The monitor signaling her alarm would probably call the nurses. So he continued, he needed to speak out. It doesn't matter that some accident stopped it. What matters is that you chose to do this and would have spent our special night with this, having sex with this bastard, if not for fate. You ruined me, Linda, he said, stepping back, tears streaming down his cheeks as they streamed from her eyes. It's all over between us. All. I'm filing for divorce today. He stopped at the door, turning to look at his soon-to-be ex-wife. You must get better. Our children will still need both of us. He saw nurses rushing towards the room. But if Lavaliere tells you to leave them for him, not just me, that's okay too. You can leave them. I can handle it. He wiped away his tears. Goodbye, Linda. Daniel Reyes saw it, half buried in the snow. It would have been too easy to miss the find, especially with the traffic circling the scene and the constant whirring of engines as drivers slowed down to watch. A lane of the road was closed for 50 meters around, allowing for a thorough inspection of the area, causing congestion even on this windy Saturday afternoon. The find could have passed for a stone if Reyes had not crouched down to examine another piece of casing and noticed that the shape of the object was too regular. He first took a photo and then carefully cleared away the snow around it, revealing a rectangular black piece of technology with many connectors and inputs. Hey, Quaim, Daniel called his partner, who was checking the neighboring areas. Come, look at this. Taking a few more pictures as Quaim Tando approached, Daniel again thought it was a waste of time. The case had already been practically solved. Numerous witnesses, the crime weapon had been found, and there was more than enough organic evidence. But he knew that, given the circumstances of the case, the detective in charge of the investigation was being extremely thorough, even more than usual. Forensic examinations had to be carried out flawlessly. Quaim sat down next to Daniel. What's there? Do you know what this is? Quaim looked at the find. He was the local technical expert and took pride in his role. This is the control unit for the surveillance camera system. Theoretically, it would be suitable for a car as well. How's the DVR? Yes, Quaim replied, but it's much more complicated. Supports multiple cameras and microphones. He took the item, glancing at Ray's to make sure everything was being recorded. He nodded and Quayne picked up the device. Like Daniel, he was wearing clear plastic gloves over his regular ones. Quayne whistled as he inspected the control box. The memory card in the device was 512 GB. This is a very expensive, high-quality thing. Noise reduction, harmonization, dynamic compression, and so on. Very dear. So there are cameras in the car? Daniel asked rhetorically. It couldn't have been any other way. Quayne looked at the wrecked Maserati. Yes. Then why is it here? How did it get here? Quayne shrugged, but then looked at his glove in surprise. There was blood on the plastic. Damn, Ray's thought. Maybe Holden's nagging insistence on the procedure wasn't such a bad idea. George Holden walked out of the cramped viewing room, shocked by what he had just seen and heard on the screen. Very shocked, very upset. He entered quietly, sat down and watched as the forensic technician processed the memory card from the recovered device. Blood on the control unit was sampled and documented before the device was cleared for digital processing. The samples have already been sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis. Everything was done strictly according to the rules. Copies of records were write-protected, the necessary documents were drawn up, hashes were created and verified. Holden watched as the technician copied 4 folders of video files from the memory card. The most recent video from the last folder caught his attention. Unlike the other 3 folders, this one has not yet been manually signed. The system automatically named it by the date and time the recording started, 20 Roman 20:0229223417. Timestamp confirmed that the folder was created at 22:34 on February 29th. It was like finding a black box after a plane crash. Daniel and Quayne quickly found discrete cameras and microphones mounted in the Maserati's ceiling, dashboard, and center console, all pointed at the front passenger seat. Combined with the husband's account of his wife's cruel betrayal, these latest videos almost entirely answer questions about how Linda Carlisle ended up being hit by 2 cars in the middle of the road in such weather. This was already alarming enough. But then the technician asked if he wanted to see what was in the other 3 folders. Those were created in the last few months and had names all female. To his regret, although he had no choice because he understood that what he saw would not allow him to sleep peacefully, especially next to his wife, Holden nodded. 2 hours later, he left the room, leaving the technician still sitting silently at the computer, and he urgently needed fresh air. Holden did not smoke, but at such moments he understood why many of his colleagues smoked. He took out one of the anti-stress toys his wife had bought him and absent-mindedly began to twirl it in his hands, reflecting on what he had seen and heard. He soon put the toy back in his pocket, still trying to process the new information. He needed to talk to 3 people. With his captain, who he hoped was still asleep, enjoying his Saturday morning. Because the captain should be well rested when he wakes up and comes to the office. Then with Jim Carlisle, who was taken to the hospital by Amos and Nguyen. And with a woman in a holding cell who seemed completely indifferent to whether she lived, died, or spent the rest of her life behind bars. He remembered Jim Carlisle not recognizing her at first, and then being shocked when he realized who it was. And yet, even though Ellen Jordan was not in any of the videos, he now knew exactly what had happened to make her so unrecognizable. His hands clenched into fists. The reality was that, other than the notes with Linda Carlisle, which seemed to be an act of reflexive anger rather than premeditated malice, he had not seen even a hint of illegality. But all this deeply offended his sense of justice. It might not be illegal, but it was undeniably wrong. Evil. That word, he decided, was evil. His phone rang as he pushed away from the wall. "Yes, Quayne," he said. "We found more memory cards, Sergeant. The center console has a false bottom." "Crap." Holden entered the small cell first, holding the door open for another person to pass through. He was holding a folder in his hands while the woman was carrying 2 small folding chairs. Ellen Jordan sat on the floor next to the tiny cot, hunched over and silent. She didn't even bother to look up. "Hello, Miss Jordan," Holden said. "Let me remind you, I am Detective Sergeant George Holden, and this is my colleague, Detective Rachel McConnell." Again, no reaction. The officers exchanged glances. McConnell opened both chairs. "Ellen Jordan has been under close surveillance since her placement in solitary confinement. She didn't say a word and refused to eat. She drank some water and went to the toilet. Otherwise, she remained in the same position, either looking straight ahead and somewhere into the distance, or looking down at her bare feet." McConnell was specially trained to work with survivors of sexual assault, and Holden called her when Ellen was brought from the scene of the accident, handcuffed, under arrest. Given what she had done and the weight of testimony and evidence made the case absolutely certain, Holden automatically assumed there was some underlying trauma, most likely sexual. But Ellen Jordan, as her newly renewed driver's license indicated, remained silent. She didn't look happy. In the photo, her eyes were sad and her eyes were exhausted, but she looked better. Looking through the contents of 3 additional memory cards, on which all the folders were neatly labeled with numbers, dates, and women's names, and not a single name was repeated, Holden found her old driver's license, which she had exchanged after her divorce from her husband. He was shocked. In the photo, the woman smiled widely. The smile reached her eyes, her cheeks were full, and her brown hair was styled in a stylish bob. She was amazingly pretty. A search on social media led him to a photo from her high school class reunion just 2 years ago, and the difference between the happy, cheerful, full of life woman and the silent, haggard creature in the cell couldn't be more stark. Her life, her appearance, have clearly changed dramatically over the past year and a half, and not at all for the better. "Miss Jordan," Holden said, sitting down, "this conversation is being recorded, and the recording can be made available to you and your lawyers upon request. However, for the record, I note that despite the many opportunities provided, you did not exercise your right to legal representation or a telephone call to an emergency contact or loved one. You were offered the services of a public defender, but you expressed neither refusal nor consent. Please indicate now if this has changed and you wish to exercise your right." Holden waited 15 seconds. "Once again, for the record, you expressed neither refusal nor consent. If this changes, please let us know verbally or by gesture, and we will pause the interaction so you can exercise your rights." Ellen didn't say anything. Holden raised an eyebrow at McConnell. "Miss Jordan," McConnell began, "we understand that you work as a paralegal, and you must understand that you are in serious trouble. You could end up behind bars for a long time, perhaps for the rest of my life." Silence. "You need to talk to us, to a lawyer, to someone," Rachel continued. "We want to understand what happened. What made you do this? You've never even had a parking ticket, and now you—" "What happened to you, Miss Jordan?" George put in. "We have photographs of you from 2 years ago." This time there was a reaction. Sob. Holden was a tough man, overly reserved, some, including his wife, said. But this sound, full of such melancholy and despair, pierced him deep into his heart. "You need to call someone, Miss Jordan," he said. "You will need support." Silence again. "Your parents, brothers and sisters, friends?" He paused. "Carl." She shuddered. "This is it," Holden thought. "Should I call Carl?" he asked insistently. She raised her head and spoke to him for the first time. "No, please don't. It will be on the news in the morning. I'd better tell him. You have children, right? He should know." "No," she said. "Please don't call him. Not because of me." Her voice broke on the last word. Holden exchanged a glance with McConnell. "What about your children?" McConnell asked. Ellen began to cry quietly, shaking. McConnell made a move towards her, but George stopped her with a gesture, signaling to wait. "They will be better off without me," Ellen finally said, trying in vain to stop her sobs. "They don't have any fun with me anyway. And now they'll hate me when they find out what I did." Holden has yet to see a folder labeled Hendrickson_Ellen on any memory card, but he knew that it existed somewhere, just as he was sure of the sun rising in the east, most likely in another expensive car. He has a new woman, Ellen said, crying harder. She will give them a better home. He deserves to be happy. You're still their mother, McConnell said. Ellen's voice finally broke through the whispers, tears streaming down her face. I don't deserve to be their mother. I don't deserve to be a wife. I destroyed everything. I destroyed something so beautiful. Oh my God, so wonderful. Then she began to sob, uttering piercing moans, wrapping her arms around herself. Rachel McConnell couldn't help herself. Ignoring protocol and procedure, she walked over and hugged the grief-stricken woman as she rocked back and forth. George Holden was equally shocked by the raw pain, shame, and regret he saw on Ellen Jordan's face. Ellen, Lavalier did. No, Ellen shouted. No, it wasn't him. It's me. I did everything myself. He didn't force me. I went to him myself. It's me. Damn it, it was me. It was me. The nurses hurried into the room, and Jim walked away at a brisk pace. The head nurse wanted to tell him to stop hurting his wife, but her professional training forced her to focus on the patient. After a minute, it became clear that Linda Carlisle was not in physical pain. There were no signs of injury, and the bed linen remained untouched, just as the nurses had left it. But emotionally, it was a different story. Her heartbeat was racing, tears were streaming down her cheeks, her body was shaking, and her mouth was silently opening and closing. What did he do to her? The younger nurse asked with indignation and misunderstanding. What did he do to her? The head nurse turned her attention to where Linda's wide eyes were looking and saw them 3 rings left on the windowsill. Call Dr. Matthews, the head nurse ordered, trying to calm the patient. Tell her she needs to be calmed down. The junior nurse hurried out while her colleague gently coaxed Linda, who seemed to hear nothing, lost in the crushing reality that the rings symbolized. Her heartbeat continued to increase, her breathing became more and more ragged. The doctor arrived quickly, took one look at the patient's condition, and immediately prescribed a mild sedative. A few minutes after the injection, Linda's tremors began to subside, her eyes becoming heavy from the effects of the medicine. The head nurse carefully wiped the tears from the patient's face as she drifted off to sleep. Then she carefully collected the rings from the windowsill. Whatever they mean, they've already done enough damage. See, said this mocking, hateful voice, which sounded clearly even in the gathering darkness, through the veil of pain and despair. I told you so. Hey, Jim, I just thought this day couldn't get any worse, Jim thought. Jim recognized the voice and did not want to turn around. He continued to walk through the hospital lobby until a hand was placed on his shoulder. Don't touch me, you bastard, he growled, and Dave Ormond abruptly withdrew his hand. Dave snickered. I think I deserve it. And how, Jim thought, clenching his fists. Dave raised his hands, taking a step back. Calm down, Jim. You don't have to react like that. What do you need? Dave lowered his hands, still keeping his distance. I was looking for you. Lavalier. It's already in the news. Jim saw the reporting cars, and although it was not yet 9 on Saturday morning, the team's fans, loyal to the star, had already begun to gather in the cold, many wearing T-shirts with his number. Let them all get hypothermia. I wanted to make sure you were okay, Dave said. You wanted to know if I was involved, Jim corrected him. That too, Dave admitted. No, said Jim, but I would like to. I know, Dave said, looking at him sympathetically. As soon as I saw the news, I went to the hotel, then went to your house. Your neighbor, an old lady, said that the police took you away late at night. Then I went to the police station and introduced myself as your lawyer. They told me that you are not a suspect and that you were taken to the hospital. I was waiting for you here. Jim was silent for a while. Fine. If that's all, I'll go home and get some sleep. Is Linda okay? No, she broke both legs in 3 places each, but it will recover. Physically, but emotionally, she'll probably need therapy when she finds out what happened to the man of her dreams. She didn't even get to sleep with him. Dave winced. Jim, she loves you. Jim's fists clenched again. Shut up. Don't even try to defend her, especially after what your wife did. Look, Dave said conciliatory, I had no idea Dee would do that. I would have stopped her. We actually had a fight in the room because of this. I didn't spend the night there, just went home. I didn't hear you take my side when Linda ran away. Dave threw up his hands hopelessly. I didn't know what to say. I would never have thought that, Linda. I was just supporting my wife. Jim laughed. This may sound ironic considering your wife snuck off to have sex with some famous athlete, but be honest, your wife is a prostitute. Once she finds a better option, she will leave. He's probably having sex with someone in your hotel room right now. Jim. She literally told me that if Lavalier had chosen her, she wouldn't even come back to our table or pretend to go to the bathroom. I would just leave with him through the main entrance. Dave looked angry, glaring at Jim with fury, and Jim felt a surge of adrenaline as he clenched his fists. But then Dave's shoulders suddenly sagged. I know, he sighed. Jim was dumbfounded. You think I didn't notice how she pushed her breasts forward and smiled at this guy? Dave asked. She always does this. Last time we were in this club, a Stallions player showed up, and the next moment I saw her dancing with him as if I wasn't there. Jim stared at him. Why are you putting up with this? What makes you think I'll put up with this? You have children. But you don't, Jim remarked. So why are you putting up with this? Or does it turn you on that your wife is leaving for other men? No. But you're still married to that bitch, Jim snapped. What about me? As soon as I get some sleep, I'll go see a lawyer. Linda is finished. Dave shook his head sadly. Damn it, Jim. You and Linda are the best of us. You are the ones we look up to, the ones we count on. Why do you think you're always the designated driver? Just because you don't know how to drink. No, because we know that you always think ahead and do the right thing. Hell, when Lavalier walked to our table, Linda was the only one who wasn't looking at him, remember? If you two don't make it, what chance do the rest of us have? Ask Linda about it, Jim replied after a moment. She ruined everything. Destroy everything. I'm sorry, Jim, Dave said. Is it true? It's a pity that we even went to this damn club. It's a pity that I didn't know what Dee was up to. I wish I had made it clear how disgusting it was. I was mostly thinking about your children and what would happen to them if you and Linda separated. Jim's fists unclenched, and he suddenly felt tired. I can't stay with a woman like her, Dave. I didn't even know I was married to someone like that. It's better to break everything off now. She didn't sleep, and I already told her everything. I will still be there for my children. Dave looked down, shaking his head sadly. I'm so sorry, Jim. Jim sighed wearily. See you, Dave? Or not. I'll go to the children and go to bed. Dave's phone rang about 5 minutes after he'd seen Jim off. He took it out, saw who was calling, and answered. I'm with Jane. You're on speakerphone, Phil Braddock announced. Dave didn't care. Okay. Have you seen him? Yes. He was involved? No. Pause. Is he okay? Dave didn't lie. No. What about Linda? Jane asked. He said she broke both her legs, Dave replied, shortly after I left. A sharp sign, then sobbing. Feminine, Jane. At least she didn't sleep with him, Phil said. Dave sighed. I don't think it matters. She tried. He filed for divorce. Already told her. No, Jane's voice rang out, and then she began to cry. Dave hung up. George Holden drove up to the gates of the Lavalier residence, a stylish one-story house with large glass windows, located on an artificially elevated plot with underground parking space. He glanced at Quame in the passenger seat, then at the papers on the dash. He knew Judge Martinez was an early riser. The judge was wearing a robe and holding a mug of coffee when Holden arrived, and was clearly unhappy about having to consider the warrant request on a Saturday morning. Holden was extremely careful in wording his request. very careful. The bloody footprints in the Maserati, the car's complex recording system, and several memory cards found in hidden compartments all pointed to a pattern. The judge took particular note of his argument that traumatized victims sometimes make statements that need to be supported or refuted by physical evidence. The fact that Lavalier was currently unable to move or conceal evidence gave the request urgency. A uniformed security guard came out of the booth and approached the car. Holden rolled down the window and showed his ID and warrant. The guard made the call, then nodded and returned to his post. The gates opened smoothly. "Ready?" he asked Quame as they drove off. The forensic technician nodded, holding a suitcase with equipment in his hands. They followed the winding road to the entrance to the underground garage. Holden couldn't help but notice the security cameras monitoring their movements. A man with a businesslike appearance was waiting for them. "Detective Sergeant, I am Martin Chase, manager of Mr. Lavalier's estate." "What is this?" Quame asked. "I watch over his properties," Chase snorted, "including guarding them when he travels or is otherwise unavailable. I saw what happened on the news and came here to clean it up and close it down." Holden was even more grateful to Martinez, irritable as he was, for not refusing him, because he had an ace up his sleeve. Sitting at the judge's table, having made his case, Holden added, pointedly, "This is a matter of justice, Ray." Judge Raymond Martinez looked at him sternly, and Holden held his foreman's gaze without looking away. Of course, the years of brotherhood, the shared painful experience that sometimes justice requires intervention, took over. Martinez approved the warrants and served them from his home. "I see," Holden said to Chase. "And how many other properties do you manage for him?" Only then did Chase realize that he might have said too much. "Sorry, but this is confidential information," he pursed his lips. "I have contacted Mr. Lavalier's lawyers regarding your appearance." Holden shrugged and motioned for Chase to lead them inside. The garage door opened to reveal a spotlessly clean space with 3 luxury cars lined up perfectly. A mechanic in overalls looked up from the car he was polishing. "You know what to do," Holden said quietly to Quame. "Make copies too," Quame whispered. Not for the first time in his career, Holden had to balance between the letter of the law and his own sense of justice. As a rule, 9 times out of 10, he followed the law. He knew when people could be given a chance, when they had suffered enough, when their mistake was stupid but tragic. That's why he was absolutely sure that helping the broken woman in his cell was the right thing to do. No punishment could be worse than what she had already done to herself. Adding to that extra time behind bars, even though he knew she had to spend some of it, there seemed deeply unfair to him. Her notes were in one of these machines. There was a folder with her old name on it. Her name was one of many that he didn't even want to think about. The number in the title of the most recent folder in Maserati, before the as yet unnamed Linda Carlisle folder, was alarmingly high, _41. Each issue represented an elaborate destruction of a family. Stupidity, a sense of entitlement, a thirst for thrills, madness caused by fascination, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the male mind, on the one hand, and calculating malice, psychopathy, and selfishness on the other. What was even more disturbing was that the numbers were not in order. "Yes," he told Quame, who had the necessary skills and proceeded to help him with what they had discovered. He stayed with Chase while Quame moved from one machine to another, distracting him while the technician worked. This took a little over an hour. It was time to leave. Quame drove as Holden inserted one memory card after another into the tablet until he found the one he needed. _27 Hendrickson Ellen 20 Roman 20 9 16. She was in a Mercedes. He plugged in the earphone and sat down to watch. He finished watching it almost an hour later in his office, as shocked and angry as he had been after watching the other Maserati entries. Even worse, the highest number was not 41, but 53. Holden calmed down as he prepared to go out. Time to show and tell Mr. James Carlisle. Again, Jim thought, cursing as he rose from the bed. He was just able to sleep in Tommy's room. After the hospital, he went to see his children. Emma and Tommy ran out of Mrs. Porter's living room, and he picked them up as they squealed, "Daddy," in his ears. Neither of them stopped talking for a second as he held them in his lap. It seemed as if they had not seen each other for a week. They had so many important things to tell. And of course, they constantly corrected each other because there was no way their brother or sister could say everything correctly. It was loud, chaotic, and liberating. In fact, 10 years of life disintegrated in less than half a day. Jim tried not to cry, realizing that their lives would change forever. The pillar of their world, their parents as a whole, was gone. Finally, he was able to calm them down. Enough to say that their mother was hurt and would be in the hospital for a long time. This made Emma cry, followed by Tommy. Watching his children cry because their mother was hurt, ultimately because of his own decision to run away with another man, was the moment he first realized he might hate Linda. He hated her then with such passion that he could hardly breathe. He knew that this feeling was temporary, but in that short moment he hatched plans for revenge on her and Marc Lavaliere, from petty to cruel. Telling the children that their mom and dad would no longer live together was impossible, not then. Not for a while. Mrs. Porter wisely announced it was time for bed and led them into the bedroom with warm milk and biscuits. Jim sat with them in the nursery until they both fell asleep. Astrid Porter was shocked when he told her what Linda had done and how she ended up in hospital. "I can't," she gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, horror in her eyes. "I can't believe Linda could do something like that." "Until yesterday," Jim said wearily, "I couldn't either." Mrs. Porter told him to go home and get some sleep, saying she would look after the children for one more night. For free. Nevertheless, he transferred the money to her and added a 20% tip. It took him almost an hour to fall asleep, again in his son's room, because he still couldn't enter the room he shared with his unfaithful wife, let alone lie down there. And then there was a knock on the door again. He ran downstairs and yanked it open with an annoyed expression on his face. "Do you ever sleep, Detective Holden?" Holden ignored the hostile tone. "Caffeine injections." "What do you need?" "Can I come in?" Holden asked. "It's cold here." Jim wanted to say no, wanted to say that he needed to sleep, but instead he stepped back and motioned for the detective to come in, only then noticing that he was holding a folder in his hand. "Mr. Carlyle, this is off the record. Do you understand?" Jim frowned. "Yes." Holden opened the folder, which turned out to be a tablet. He started clicking on the icons. "I want you to look at something. This concerns your wife. I'm warning you, you won't like this." Linda woke up with difficulty, her throat constricted, her eyes trembled and opened, filled with confusion, when she saw white walls, heard the hum and horns of cars, felt pain in her legs. Then everything came back. All. Her gaze desperately rushed to the windowsill, but there was nothing there. Did she think it was a dream? She wondered, had Jim really left their rings, their marriage, behind? Did she really sneak away from him on their special night, in front of their friends, to spend the night with Marc Lavaliere? Tears filled her eyes. It was not a dream, not a nightmare. She really did it. And Jim did exactly what she remembered. Said what he said while she couldn't utter a sound. "Hello, Linda," she heard from the left, and she had the strength to turn her head. "You woke up? God bless." "We're so sorry," Jane said, with tears in her eyes. "We're so sorry." "Where? Jim?" It was difficult for her to speak. The words barely came out, but her vocal cords finally began to work. "He left." "Left your rings and returned to your house," Dee replied, disgusted in her voice. "He couldn't just give you one night. This selfish bastard couldn't even wait." "Go to hell, Di," Linda said. Dee resented it. "What did you say?" Linda's eyes stared at her. "Go to hell." Dee's mouth dropped open in amazement. "Are you blaming me for this, Linda?" "No," Linda answered. "I blame myself for listening to you." "Hypocritical bitch," Dee screamed. "You gave me a sign, remember? You followed me into the bathroom so I could help you sneak out." Linda closed her eyes. Then she opened them again, the desperation palpable. I turned to that friend who always told me what I wanted to hear, to that friend who always talks about the fantasy list, to that friend who cheats on her husband all the time. Jane, confused, looked from one to the other, while Dee's breathing became more and more erratic, and her expression became shocked, indignant. "We all know," Linda croaked, "that you're sleeping with your boss." "Smug bitch," Dee squealed. "I didn't force you to do anything. You knew what you wanted, and you did it." Tears flowed from Linda's eyes. "Yes, I knew. I'm responsible. And I will never forgive myself." Her eyes narrowed. "But a real friend would have tried to stop me. A real friend wouldn't say, 'Have fun,' and wouldn't say that my husband would brag to his friends that I left him to sleep with another man." "Fuck you, Linda," Dee snapped. "You yourself left your weak-willed husband. As soon as a real man took you in his hands, you refused. You are no better than me." Her teeth clenched. "And to think that I even offered myself to Jim to console his stupid, fragile male ego so that he wouldn't leave you." "I don't need," Linda wheezed, "such a friend. Go away, Dee. Stay away from me." Dee ran out of the room, and Linda burst into tears, plunged into despair, remembering what she had done. Linda Carlisle couldn't believe herself. That she could be so brave, could allow herself to let go without thinking about what it would look like. That she could throw caution to the wind and live out her fantasy. Mark Lavaliere stopped to kiss her twice before they reached his car, and he kissed her one more time before he opened the door for her, like a true gentleman. He then leaned over and kissed her as he sat in the driver's seat. She was so horny and wet that she could barely breathe. Mark must have already smelled her. She was shocked when Mark Lavaliere asked her to dance. She didn't try to get his attention. She was sure that he would invite someone else. But he invited her, and she saw the envy in Dee's eyes, and realized that she would never again have the chance to say that she danced with Mark Lavaliere, so she gave him her hand. She was too tense to say anything. She didn't even tell him her name until they were on the dance floor, and he asked. She knew that she had told Jim that she would only dance with him, but she thought that she would dance a couple of dances with Mark, and then go back to her husband, and he would understand. She enjoyed dancing with Mark. He was a very good dancer and said he was thinking of teaching ballroom dancing when he finished football if his knees weren't giving out by then. She knew he would be good at it. After the second quick dance, she thought it was all over. She was about to thank him for the dance when suddenly a slow melody began to play and his arms wrapped around her. It sounded like a cliché, like something that would happen to a stupid teenager with a celebrity crush. But in that moment, she forgot about everything but him. He didn't say anything, but she knew that he wanted much more from her than just a dance. And almost at the same moment, she realized that she was ready to give it to him. She didn't really make a decision, didn't think about it. She just knew, as if she had been told. During the second slow dance, he asked her if she was ready. He didn't need to explain what he meant. She simply nodded, unable to say a word. "There is a back door near the toilets. Tell him you need to leave, and I'll meet you there," Mark Lavaliere said. She liked that he was gentleman enough not to come up to their table and rub it in Jim's face. But when she returned to the table, she saw Jim's face, and for a moment, just a moment, she hesitated and allowed him to take her hand. Then her gaze met the gaze of Dee, who was sitting opposite. And at that moment, Dee stood up from the table and said, "Sorry, everyone, but I urgently need to go to the toilet. Linda, will you come with me?" She knew that look and understood what it really meant. "Sorry, Jim. I need to clean myself up too," she told her husband. When she entered the ladies' room, Dee was already standing right at the door, literally shaking with excitement. "Oh, damn, Linda, are you seriously hesitating? It's Mark Lavaliere there, waiting for you. He chose the only woman in this room who didn't throw herself into his arms. Damn, I'm so jealous I could scream." Linda tried to say something, but Dee interrupted her. "Listen to me. This happens once in a lifetime. This is the kind of incident they write about in romance novels. Jim loves you. He will understand. Hell, he'll probably brag to his friends later that his wife was so hot that she caught the attention of Mark Lavalier. Dee grabbed Linda by the shoulders. Think about it. You have your whole life ahead of you to be Jim's wife. But there is only one chance to be with Mark Lavalier. One magical night that you will remember for the rest of your life. I don't know, Linda said, although the decision had already been made. And Dee knew it. You are so lucky. You will get what millions of women only dream of. What will he do to you? And guess what? You can make it up to Jim later. But what if you back down now? You will regret this all your life. Dee then promised that she would make sure Jim didn't find out, at least until Linda was far away. She assured her that she would remind Jim how much she loved him. She told her to enjoy it and be sure to tell everything when she returned from her fantasy. The truth was that Linda didn't need much convincing. Dee knew that at that moment Linda wanted this more than anything in the world, and her assurances only confirmed that everything would be fine. The next second Linda was out the door and Mark was waiting for her with his coat, having somehow gotten it without a wardrobe number, just one of the perks of being a celebrity. When he put his hands on her shoulders, helping her put on her coat, she felt just as shocked and conquered as she had felt in his arms on the dance floor. He was a man who simply knew that he had the right to any woman he wanted, and he chose her. And that was all. He was absolutely sure that she wouldn't say no to anything he wanted. And he was right. And now they were sitting in his car, driving somewhere into the distance towards a night that promised to be unforgettable. He took her hand, her left hand, the one with the rings, and brought it to his lips, making her tremble. He will be an amazing lover. She knew it from the way he danced with her and kissed her. He will completely take possession of her and make her forget everything her husband, children, life, past, future except him, for the time that they spend together. And then she would return home to the man who held her heart after this one night, this one adventure. Jim would understand, she knew. Over time, she loved him with all her heart and soul. I've been in love for 10 years. He definitely won't judge her for this opportunity. Spending the night with Mark Lavalier, just one night in their entire marriage, would be an experience she would remember for the rest of her life. Event with a capital letter C. This had nothing to do with her feelings for her husband. After this, she will return home to the person she loved, and everything will be as before. Will it happen? A voice sounded in her head. Mark put his hand on her thigh, just put it there, as if she belonged to him. It was as if she all belonged to him. When he left her at home tomorrow, she knew their marriage would have to go through a difficult phase. She wasn't naive enough to think otherwise. But this cannot destroy him in any way. 10 years cannot be destroyed in one night and morning. They can, can't they? A voice rang out. No, she told herself decisively. She and Jim are just perfect for each other. It will be impossible to let each other go. She could imagine it. Mark drops her off around noon after an incredible night and a morning of the most amazing sex of her life. He will stop at their entrance, say, "Thank you for a wonderful evening and morning," hug her, and give her a light farewell kiss. He would stay in the car until she opened the door, just like Jim always did when they were dating. Mark Lavalier was a gentleman. All the newspapers said so. She would smile and wave at him, and he would smile and wave back, and that would be the end of it. Once and never again. Just a memory that she will cherish. "Jim, Jim, I'm home," she will say upon entering their house. And she would find him waiting for her, sad and heartbroken over her betrayal, but still loving her and willing to forgive her. Ready to give her a chance to prove his love and devotion, to make amends for what she had done. "It's still me, the same as always," she will say. "Nothing has changed. My love for you is still the same as yesterday." He would listen to her when she said that it was just one night, and that she belonged to him now and always, and then she will kiss him. "It won't be like this," said that hateful voice. "Yes, that's exactly what will happen. You can't even imagine this," the voice said mockingly. "Because this is not your husband. This is not Jim. He won't let you touch him, and he himself will not touch you. No. Try to imagine that he is touching you, knowing that you publicly made a laughing stock of him and ran away to another man. To her horror, Linda realized that the mocking voice was right. She could easily create images of their intimacy, but as soon as the imaginary date reached February and beyond, everything became difficult, very difficult. But it's just one night of all that will belong only to him, if he loves me. He knows. That's why he will never forgive you. Never. Mark stopped at a red light. There was a timer at the traffic light indicating that the wait was just under a minute, and suddenly his finger was under her chin. With a slight movement, he called her to him. It was another soul-promising kiss, and he told her that everything was hopeless. She belonged to him. His hand slid under her skirt, confidently, imperiously. Every nerve of her responded to his touch. But the voice did not stop. Jim will never touch you again. I'm not doing this to hurt him, but for myself. This is just one special night. The special night that you promised him, and that you gave to Mark Lavalier. He won't let it destroy us. He must think about what this will do to our children. And now you suddenly remembered about children. He is their father. He's a good person. Therefore, he will probably stay in the same house with you for the sake of the children, but only until they understand that he is leaving you, not them. No, all that loving touching, those special moments, the smile that appeared on his face at the mere sight of you, all this will disappear. He won't be able to pretend for long. He doesn't know how to be insincere. I can get him back. We are one whole, me and the children. He can't love them without loving me. I gave them to him. He will always be their father. And here you are. You may have ceased to be his wife. This is not true. You know him. He will hate you, because every time he looks at you, he will remember the time you snuck away to sleep with Mark Lavalier. I'll fix everything. I will become an ideal wife. To him, you were already perfect, so one day he will stop hating you. He will then stop feeling anything for you because he won't be able to continually experience that loss without breaking down, and then he will move on. Linda suddenly felt cold, and the thrill of Mark's fingers lazily drawing circles on her inner thigh became less exciting, less enjoyable. You know how his mind works. Once he believes that you have released him from your vows, he will no longer feel the need to be faithful to you. There won't be any more. No, he loves me. If you can love him and still publicly leave him to sleep with another man, why can't he do the same with another woman? I can let him spend the night with another woman. And he allowed you to run into the arms of Mark Lavalier. That's not true, and he is not petty enough to take revenge. He won't sleep with other women for revenge. He will do this because you no longer have his heart, because you've broken him into pieces, and he won't even consider that he's cheating on you. He will look for someone who will help him restore it. She felt herself begin to shake. Mark had been driving them to their meeting place for about 10 minutes. She gave control completely to him, without even asking where they were going. I'll fix everything, she said to the voice. This will be hard for a while, but I will prove to him that I love him and that it was just a one-time event, that I will always return to him. Always? So this isn't the last time. No, that's not what I meant. How are you going to convince him that you will never run off with another famous athlete again? No, she said to the voice. It won't be the same with another man. It's Mark Lavalier. I will make him understand that I was overwhelmed, almost consumed by Mark. So his presence took away your will, made you helpless. She thought. It was not so much a lack of will, but rather her will was surrounded. She felt it the first time he took her into his arms for a slow dance. She knew then that she belonged to him in that moment, for whatever he wanted, for as long as he wanted it. It didn't feel like a conscious choice. All the decisions seemed to have already been made. So he will have to live with the idea that every time Mark Lavalier decides he wants you, the decision has already been made, and you will leave for him again. No, I will never do this again. Do you really think he will believe you? Will he trust you when you say it? Are you going to tell him that you couldn't control yourself around Mark Lavalier and hope he'll just get over it? I'm still the same as yesterday. Do you really think that he can live calmly with the fact that if you accidentally meet Lavalier on the street, in a park, in a restaurant, and he says, let's go, you'll be stunned, absorbed, and go to him again? Linda was shaking so much that Mark noticed it. Are you okay, Linda? Mark asked. Don't worry, we'll be with you soon. I'll take care of you. Linda nodded and smiled. If anything could silence the voice and allow her to simply surrender to the moment, it was his touch, his voice. Not so. I hope, the voice spoke again, Jim doesn't meet Jaina Aguilar while things are still difficult. Her imagination immediately drew the image of this woman. Jaina Aguilar was once a swimsuit and lingerie model to help pay for college and culinary school, but despite many extremely lucrative offers, she refused to pursue a modeling career. Once she earned enough money to cover her student debts, pay for culinary school, and rent space for her bakery for 2 years, she quit modeling. Now she made amazing cakes in her own pastry shop and lived nearby. Linda knew that Jim liked Jaina. I really liked it. Everything Linda knew about Jaina Aguilar's life, she learned from Jim. Their meeting took place in a park near Jim's office a year ago during lunch break. Jim dined there during the summer and Jaina participated in a week-long baking fair. Jim was the only man who, despite the fake wedding ring on her finger, simply nodded to her in greeting instead of trying to pick her up 2 days in a row. On the third day, she sat next to him on the bench and asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend so that she could have lunch in peace. He agreed. The next day, she brought something for him, and the next one, and the next one. Jim told her everything. The woman who sat with him on the bench so as not to be disturbed. The same woman who brought him lunches for the rest of the week gave him her number and business card. But a woman always knows. So Linda made a long detour to stop by Jane's bakery, ostensibly for cupcakes and donuts for her office. Seeing her in person was a shock for Linda. Somewhere in the perfect zone between too short and too high, Jaina was full and round where it counted, her breasts large and high, her lips naturally plump, as if made for kissing. Her face was the perfect combination of Thai, Dominican, and Italian features, and her long dark hair fell down her back. On the walls of her establishment, model bakes, hung several neatly designed pages from magazines in which she advertised dresses and evening wear. She introduced herself. My name is Linda. I am the wife of Jim Carlisle. He gave me your business card. He said your work is amazing. Oh, that's so cute. Jaina blushed slightly, but it was enough to confirm what Linda already knew. How is he? Such a good person. You are so lucky. Yes, lucky, Linda replied, realizing that the message had been sent. And accepted. These works look simply magnificent. Jaina Aguilar actively dated men, but remained unmarried. She still occasionally sent Jim friendly, unobtrusive holiday greetings. She was not an unattainable celebrity, although she easily could have become one. Linda found her on the internet and saw the few video clips that were filmed on the catwalk, a photo from her only date with some actor. But even just looking at her in her store without video, Linda immediately understood why men stopped to propose to her. She exuded sensuality with every movement, unconsciously, without any effort. It was easy to imagine her, dressed with the intent to kill, going out hunting to capture her prey, to snatch a husband right out of his wife's arms for one night, a week, or for life. Linda knew that if Jaina decided to take Jim away from her, it would be useless to compete with her. Everything will depend on Jim himself. Will he endure it? Will he be able to evaluate his vows, family, and 10 years of love in comparison with one night with the goddess? Will he be able to avoid doing what she herself decided to do? Yes, whispered the voice. You can imagine it. She could. Sitting with him somewhere in a nice restaurant, dressed up, desperately trying to recapture that special look he gave her before that night with Mark Lavalier. Then Jaina Aguilar will walk into the restaurant, wearing one of those super sexy evening dresses she showed on the runway, but with an even deeper neckline, a higher slit, a tighter silhouette. She will come up and ask him to dance, or he'll just give him that same look and invitation. And he will agree. Why not? He no longer owes his wife anything. Not after this. And when Jaina asks if he wants to leave with her, he will have absolutely no reason to refuse. He will leave his depressed, destroyed wife at the table, watching her husband choose another. Linda Carlyle removed Mark Lavaliere's hand from under her skirt. Please take me back. It was a mistake. I can't. Mark looked at her in surprise. It was as if his food suddenly spoke. What's wrong, Linda? That's it, she answered. It's not like that. I love my husband. This evening was supposed to be special for us, and I just left him, abandoned him, for your sake. It's just one night. Mark tried to justify himself. Does he appreciate what you have if he can't give you one night of freedom? Experience life to the fullest. Isn't he selfish? Do you see? Linda said to the voice, full of resentment. How can he let one night destroy 10 years, our family, our future together? The voice replied, how long did it take to make your crystal vase, the one that you love so much and carefully keep on the fireplace, made by hand, with love, right? The master worked for a long time. Weeks, months. How long does it take to smash it to pieces? Instant. And all these weeks and months will become nothing. No, Linda told Mark. There are no breaks in marriage. Please turn around and take me back. I beg you. He took her hand, her left hand, the one with the rings on it, and she abruptly pulled it away. Please don't touch me. I beg you. Just take me home. Mark clenched his jaw, but kept his cool. Why don't we just take a little ride, go somewhere and talk? No, she begged. Take me home now. I need to go back to my husband. I need to fix everything. I can't just take you back, Linda, Mark replied, continuing to drive in the same direction. Why? His face changed. You want me. I know this. You know it. And I want you. You know that too. We've come too far to turn back. It will happen. Let me take care of you. The voice returned. He wants to buy time so that even if you return home without sleeping with him, it will no longer matter. Jim won't believe you. They stopped at a crossroads. Turn left. The road is to the most expensive area of the city. No. That's not going to happen, Mr. Lavaliere, Linda growled. Just let me out here. He looked around incredulously at the snow outside the window. You will freeze to death. I'd rather die than lose my husband, my family. Mark pressed. Is his love so fragile? Is he that insecure? Linda unbuckled her seat belt and tried to open the door. Mark easily reached out and slammed it back. She began to struggle with him, but he held the door tightly, easily suppressing her attempts. Please, she screamed. Let me go. Let go. She stopped pulling the door and started hitting him. She was amazed by his strength and size from the moment he took her hand at the dance. It made her feel small and helpless, and then she loved it. But now she realized that she could not do anything to him. But no matter how great a man is, a slap in the face always remains a slap in the face. Especially 3, irritated, angry, he let go of the door with a curse. Linda opened it and jumped out into the icy cold. Mark, still angry, pushed her, causing her to trip and fall onto the road, straight into the path of a truck that was just turning right. She tried to jump away, screaming in horror, and we must give the driver his due. He turned sharply to the side when he saw a woman suddenly jumping out of a parked car in his way. The truck body rushed past her, but the side mirror was exactly at the level of her head. The blow sent her spinning, her scream was cut off, and she fell. The frightened truck driver opened the door and looked out. Half the car had already turned, but he still saw drops of blood on the snow and the vague figure of a man driving a sports car. The man in the sports car, in a panic, slammed the passenger door and drove away, straight through the intersection, while the traffic light was still red. The truck driver jumped out of the cab and ran, waving his arms, to stop the car that was driving behind him, honking to the right. He shouted, although he knew that no one would hear him. At the last moment, a driver in the oncoming lane turned away from a woman lying on the asphalt. But this was not enough. The truck driver screamed in horror as she fell under the wheels. Ellen Jordan hated driving in the snow. She could count on one hand the number of times she had to do this before the wedding. After that, she never drove in snowy weather again. For 12 years, she sat in the passenger seat, completely trusting Carl Hendrickson to get her and, subsequently, their children home safe and sound no matter the weather. However, Carl always made sure that her car had good snow tires in winter, even though he knew that she would not voluntarily drive in the snow. But he still taught her this in case of an emergency. Over the past year and a half, she has had to learn many new things. Take out the trash, mow the lawn, clean gutters, getting things that he could just reach out and take for her. She had to learn to be Ellen Jordan again instead of Ellen Hendrickson. She had to learn to live with the fact that her birthday passed without her beloved, albeit false, rendition of Happy Birthday. She had to learn to live without the family rings that had adorned her hand for 12 years. She had to learn to live with such shame and self-hatred that she would wake up at night crying. When her children were not around, she screamed alone in her room. She had lost so much weight that a classmate who had seen her 2 years earlier at a high school reunion now looked several times to recognize her in the supermarket. When he finally recognized her, he looked at her with such pity that she ran out of the supermarket and burst into tears in her car. She quit her job to take a lower-paying remote position rather than pretend there was any joy left in her life. She learned to forget how to smile. Her parents, sister, and brother were scared for her, but she got tired of their calls and blocked them. Instead, she sent daily texts telling her she was doing well. But she knew that this was not true, and they knew it too. She went so far as to buy a bottle of sleeping pills and sit on the bed, looking at it, wanting to find the courage to take it all at once. One day, she even watched a video on the internet about how to tie a noose after finding some rope in the garage. She even thought about buying a pistol with one cartridge. The only reason she continued to exist was her children. "You left me. You betrayed our marriage," Carl said, dead-eyed, as she knelt before him, begging for forgiveness, for him to love her again, after running outside to stop him and almost getting run over. "Carl, please don't abandon our children either. Don't you dare go cowboy style." She put the pills aside and continued to live, repeating to herself that she must be faithful to at least this last request of her ex-husband. Besides attending town meetings and grocery shopping, she became a recluse. When the children were not home, she did not shower or brush her teeth. She hardly ate. She just sat in the dark and cried. She learned to live with pain. She was crying now, returning home after taking the children to Carl's new house in the neighboring suburb. He chose this house so that his children could continue to study in the same good school. He left her the house, half the money from their joint account, and demanded full custody of the children. It was generous, more generous than she deserved. It was also cruel. Throughout the entire process, he refused to be in the same room with her. He communicated exclusively through a lawyer. She agreed to everything, seeing no point in discussing anything, desperately wanting to ease his pain with the little she had left. The demand to immediately stop using his last name broke her, and she burst into tears right in the conference room. She agreed to this too. She caught her breath when she saw him silhouetted in the doorway, his arms open to their 3 children as they ran down the driveway toward him. Then another figure appeared next to him, a female one, joining him to greet them as they rushed towards him laughing and screaming. There was no more laughing and shouting in her house. He still refused to look at her and said he never wanted to see her again. She didn't want to hurt him anymore, so she stayed in the car until the door closed. She sobbed as she began to walk back to the dark and lonely house where she lived, or rather, existed. She knew she had to sell it because it was too big for her new life, because every part of it reminded her of her past life and its loss. But other than the children, that was all she had left of what she once had. From him. So she masochistically held on to that house, despite the knowledge that that life was gone forever. She was almost out of the suburbs when she spotted a house of worship. She didn't want to return to the dark and empty house, but she had nowhere else to go. She parked and went inside. It was warm inside, and the priest, looking at her face, said that she could stay as long as necessary. She hadn't prayed for a long time. Since then, she has been praying for Carl to return to her and give her the opportunity to atone. This prayer went unheard. After she signed the documents and her attempts at reconciliation were harshly and automatically rejected, she stopped praying about anything. She didn't pray this time either. The priest simply sat next to her while she cried and asked for forgiveness and relief from the pain. It would be enough just to survive for the sake of the children. She wanted Carl to be happy. When she finally looked up, it was already about 11 p.m. She apologized to the priest, but he said that she was worrying for nothing and that he was ready to sit with her until dawn if necessary. After that, she left, receiving a hug and hearing from the priest that there is hope and love for everyone in the world. She is not forgotten. This made her cry even more. She didn't deserve this. Marc Lavaliere swore, sincerely not understanding how everything could turn out so unexpectedly. One of his simplest conquests had turned into this nightmare. She was so easily subdued, so easily conquered, so infatuated that he could practically smell her arousal. And suddenly she had this epic crisis of conscience. This happens sometimes, but he always knew who exactly would face a similar problem. He knew how to overcome this barrier. A few soothing words, removing their fears, holding her hand, kissing her. Always touching, reasserting his dominance, his possession, and they belonged completely to him again. With those he assumed would be more resistant to such thoughts about the husbands they had betrayed, he would go to a nearby penthouse, giving them minimal time to think and realize the consequences. With others, like Linda, he believed he could take his time. He knew all he had to do was put them in a luxury car and drive them to one of his elaborately appointed houses, which he used for meetings to quell any doubts and increase the excitement of what was happening. 9 times out of 10, he started with dancing. Nothing worked better than dancing slowly while clinging closely to a woman. It was for this reason that he once learned ballroom dancing. And he even paid orchestra conductors to play slow compositions at his signal when he made his choice, and she was already helpless in his arms. However, everything always ended the same. Finding themselves alone, under his arms, they stopped thinking until it was all over. Usually, this did not happen until late in the morning, after which he drove them home, remaining a gentleman to the end. It was then that the attack of conscience usually began. After, not before. Some became defiantly stubborn, ready to justify their betrayal with something like revenge or deserved retribution for their husbands' past mistakes. Others burst into tears the closer they got to their marital home, suddenly realizing the full extent of the destruction they had caused to their lives. Several times he even had to stop the car so that the woman could throw up. And there were those, like Linda, he thought, who returned home believing that it was just a small adventure, an episode, insignificant in the grand scheme of their lives. They sincerely believed that they would return to their husbands and everything would soon be as before, that their betrayal would be forgiven by the men who loved them and whom they often really loved. In fact, this happened extremely, extremely rarely. He knew it was psychopathic, but he didn't hide it. He took pleasure in snatching married women from the arms of their husbands right in front of their eyes, and then spending the most unforgettable nights of their lives with their wives. He liked to imagine the defeated expression on their husbands' faces. Often he saw it in reality, and it excited him. Many of his conquests returned when they realized that there was no longer a way back to their former life. In each case, he politely refused. Some came for money, finding themselves without a home or livelihood. One day, a woman claimed that, despite his vasectomy, he allegedly made her pregnant. Another somehow got his number to beg him to call her husband, who had filed for divorce, and convince him that it was just a night, just sex. They sought from him consolation, confirmation, repetition, the special affection that they thought he must have felt for them to do all this so delightfully to them. He was actually a really good lover. He knew the female body very well. With that kind of experience, he'd be a fool if he didn't become very, very good at it. But he also understood that most of the work was in their heads. The fact that they were with Marc Lavaliere, and the realization that they are violating sacred vows, doing what seemed unthinkable just a few hours ago. This feeling that they are doing something so immoral, so bad. Therefore, every caress, every kiss, every touch, every use of force in exactly the right degree, and every time he mastered them became 1,000 times stronger for them. Besides this, he was extremely polite, gallant, and courteous. He opened doors for them, remembered their names, and prepared breakfast for them. And then he took them home, knowing that he had humiliated their husbands even more deeply. After all, nothing they could do would compare to what their wives experienced with him. That is why, even when he brought the woman home after possessing her, her body was still burning from his touch. She did not blame him for the fact that her life was ruined, that her marriage was destroyed, and her husband was humiliated. Even those who cried, driving up to the house in horror of what awaited them, did not refuse his farewell kiss, still smiled when he thanked them for the wonderful night and morning. He even kissed those who were sick along the way. Flying past the next intersection, Marc Lavaliere could not contain his anger at himself. How could he have been so wrong about this Linda Carlisle? It had been a long time since he had not completed his hunt. Maybe he has become too self-confident. He was supposed to take her to the penthouse. In 10 minutes, she would be naked and completely his. Instead, she quotes ... the ad question mark. He felt a cold sweat run down his back. It was bad, very bad. Morrison's cameras would have captured her walking out with him, then kissing on the way to the car leaving shortly after. With a corpse in hand, you can't just pay and delete the post like he did before. And this was not the only recording that bothered him. Yes, he didn't want her to leave the car, but he pushed her as she was getting out, losing control in one probably fateful moment. The cameras, they were in all his recording machines, captured everything. He needed to get rid of it. But first, return to the scene of the incident. Fast. He was ashamed of himself for running away. Marc Lavaliere did not give in to panic neither on the field nor off it. He slowed down, turned around in 3 steps, and drove back. It was necessary to hurry before the police reached the scene of the accident. If the driver who hit her is still there, a couple $1,000s will make him forget that Marc left the scene. There were enough witnesses and camera footage to confirm that she voluntarily got into the car, and the examination will prove that it was not his car that hit her. It will pain him to admit that he could not break her resistance, could not completely possess her, and that she, feeling guilty, went crazy and jumped out of his car in the middle of that terrible February night. But it's still better than a barrage of accusations for running away. And if he was found with her holding her head when the police arrived, the fact that he took her away from her husband might just be a minor detail in the story. It might even seem romantic, which will certainly be helpful. Films and books about women embarking on dizzying affairs on the side are popular among women for a reason. Let his agent and the Sharks' PR team justify their salary. It was already past 11 p.m., and on a cold winter night, all the traffic lights were flashing yellow. Marc pressed the gas pedal all the way. His car was equipped with premium winter tires with excellent grip, and he roared across the intersection. He desperately turned the steering wheel, trying to avoid a collision with a truck speeding on the right. Almost succeeded, but the front fender of the truck hit the Maserati and the car spun. Ellen slowed down as she approached the intersection, although the flashing yellow traffic light was already telling her to be careful. That's when she saw the accident right in front of her. The sports car was speeding through the intersection when it was hit by a truck. The car spun and Ellen screamed as it passed just a few feet from her minivan and then went into a ditch. She was shaking as she climbed out of the minivan into the icy night. She had basic knowledge of first aid, and after a minute, frozen in fear in the car, she realized that she had to help. Even with the dented rear fender, it was a beautiful car, she noted as she walked closer. The airbags deployed, and as she approached, she heard sounds a loud male voice spewing curses. She felt relieved. From what she had managed to notice as the car rushed past, there was only one person there, and this man was clearly alive and did not suffer serious injuries. The driver's door swung open, and a large arm and leg in a classic leather shoe poked out. Then a head appeared, and soon the whole of him scrambled out from under the airbags. Ellen's mouth was dry. He had a very handsome face, even with the streams of blood flowing from his head. The body is large, wide chest, narrow waist, an athlete in his prime. She knew who it was. Her ex-husband was an avid football fan and an ardent supporter of the Sharks. She herself was never interested in the game, but often snuggled up next to Carl on the sofa while he watched the match, happy to be hugged, warmed, loved. "I'm fine," said Mark Lavaliere, the local hero on the field, staggering slightly as he rose to his feet. "Everything is fine." "You're bleeding," Ellen said. "I'll get the first aid kit now." "Thank you," Mark muttered. He climbed out of the snowdrift onto the road while Ellen opened the trunk of her minivan, where her ex-husband Carl had once installed a first aid kit before their divorce. Mark Lavaliere stood looking at the wrecked Maserati, knowing that he would not be able to get to Linda Carlisle's body in time. Fortunately, he was able to get the camera control unit with a memory card from the glove compartment. He usually waited until the machine had accumulated 5 conquests before copying the records into his personal collection. Obviously, that won't happen this time. Linda Carlisle was supposed to be 4th on this card, 54th overall. Bye. He decided that he would invest in a wireless system in each machine so that the recordings would be automatically transferred to the home server after each woman. There was already something similar in his penthouse. Either way, he thought resignedly, it was time for his agent and the Sharks' PR team to justify their salary. He heard the woman return with the first aid kit and turned to give her his most charming smile. The baseball bat hit him on the cheek, knocking out his jaw and several teeth. The next blow hit his shin, and he collapsed onto the icy asphalt, screaming as the pain washed over him. Instinctively, he covered his head with his hands as Ellen Jordan, screaming furiously, brought the bat down on his cowering form again and again. Then she was knocked down, and the bat was knocked out of her hands. The man holding her was screaming for help from other drivers as she squirmed and scratched and kept screaming and screaming and screaming. "I'm warning you, you won't like what you see at the beginning," Holden said, holding out a tablet with a downloaded video. "But you need to watch to the end." Jim looked, and Holden was right. He didn't like it. He saw how Linda enthusiastically got into Mark Lavaliere's car, how they kissed, how her gaze burned with passion, how his hand slid under the hem of her blue dress. Who installed the cameras in Lavaliere's car was his first stupid thought. Every moment was captured from multiple angles, synchronized perfectly with crystal clear sound. At one point, Lavaliere raised her left hand, held it in front of the camera for exactly a second so that the wedding rings were in focus, and then brought her fingers to his lips and kissed her. Jim almost jumped up then. He wanted to shout at Holden, ask why he had come to tear him apart, bringing evidence of his wife's infidelity. But then Linda suddenly stared at one point he knew that look. She thought as she did, playing board games, making plans, typing, analyzing, weighing. Then horror crossed her face, and everything changed. George Holden had to physically restrain Jim from running out into the icy cold in only a t-shirt and pajama pants. 3 minutes later, now dressed for the weather, a crying Jim Carlisle sat in Holden's car as he drove him back to St. Martin's Hospital. Jim Carlisle jumped out of the elevator, almost running. He rushed past the nurse's station, heading towards the room at the end of the corridor, tears streaming down his face. The youngest nurse caring for Linda saw him and screamed, scaring her colleagues, and several doctors gathered at the post. "Stop," she shouted, pointing her finger. "Someone stop him." If there's one thing you can say about intensive care nurses, it's that their reactions are lightning fast. 2 nurses rushed towards Jim, grabbing his arm and shoulder, while the third nurse, a short woman just over 5 feet tall, simply stepped towards him. Jim could have shaken off the nurse's grip on his arm and fought his way past the petite woman in blue scrubs who stood before him with her head held high. But the nurse holding him by the shoulder was a real giant, 6 feet 7 inches tall, and possessed of impressive physical strength. By the time George Holden reached the scene, both of Linda's nurses had joined their petite colleague in standing in front of Jim. "What are you doing here anyway?" the younger nurse shouted. "Do you want to see it through to the end? Is this your plan?" "He needs to see his wife," Holden intervened, showing his ID. "Please let him through." "This is not a police station, officer," the head nurse replied sharply. "This is a hospital." She pointed a finger at Jim. "His wife just came out of a 7-hour operation, and he upset her so much that we had to put her to sleep again." Jim could barely speak through his tears. "Please, please, I need to see her." "Ma'am," Holden said calmly, "I promise you, this time everything will be different." Another minute passed, watched curiously by those around him, but in the end, the nurses agreed to let him see his wife, accompanying him themselves. The huge nurse and Holden also went with them so that if necessary, they would take Jim out without questions asked. Jane was already there, Jim noted distantly, holding Linda's hand and helping her wipe the tears streaming down her face. Then their eyes met and Jim saw only her. "Jim." Her voice wavered as she saw tears in his eyes as he approached her bed. "Linda," he said, barely containing his emotions. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Jim. I'm so sorry I danced with him. I'm so sorry I let him take me away from you. I ran away with him like you meant nothing to me. I humiliated you. I left you even though you trusted me." "Shut up, Linda," Jim said. "Just shut up." Her eyes widened in surprise. She did not understand why he was holding her hand. "I know what happened in the car," Jim said. "What?" She was confused. "In Lavaliere's car. I saw what happened. All this. I saw the video." "Video?" "He had cameras in his car. Everything was recorded." Linda burst into tears again. "Oh, God. So you saw me get into his car. You saw me kissing him. You saw how excited I was, how I wanted it." "Yes," said Jim. "I saw it all. It hurt me. Then I saw you remember." "Do you remember?" "I saw you remember who you are," Jim said. "I saw how you remembered me, remembered us." Linda started crying harder. Jim hugged her as tears streamed down his face. "I love you, Linda," Jim said. "I love you more than anything in the world." Holden has seen enough. He wasn't known for his smile, but he suddenly found himself smiling. The 3 nurses and the woman who wiped Linda's face were also smiling, and everyone had tears in their eyes. "Well, Mr. Carlyle," Holden said, "it's time for me to go. I take it I can leave you here." "I'm not going anywhere," Jim confirmed, smiling widely. "And please, detective, just call me Jim." He suddenly looked out the window as if he was looking for something. Then he asked, "Where are our rings?" "I left them." The head nurse quickly replied, "I'll go get them now." She came out with a large order. "And by the way, I don't think you've been officially introduced yet," Jim said. "This is my wife, Linda." He pointed to the woman. "Linda, this is Detective Sergeant Holden." "Hello," she said, looking a little puzzled. "And this is Jane," Jim said in a much less warm tone. "She was there, at Morrison's store." Holden nodded politely to Jane before turning to Linda. "It's very nice to meet you, Linda," he said. "I'm the detective in charge of Mr. Lavaliere's case. You can call me George." The head nurse returned, stuck her head in the door, and extended a clenched fist. She had another urgent matter. The nurse came over and took the rings and handed them to Jim. "Case?" "Yes," George confirmed. "Mr. Lavaliere was seriously injured in an incident with another woman, after he pushed you out of his car." "With another woman?" Linda looked even more confused. All 3 women in the room stared at him. "Ma'am," Holden took a deep breath, "you are not the first to fall under the influence of Lavaliere. He preys on married women. He films himself taking them away from their husbands for the night, and then returning them to their ruined lives and families. It gives him pleasure. He likes to humiliate their husbands. He likes to destroy a woman's life and her home. He's a psychopath. Jane gasped, putting her hand to her mouth, looking terribly shocked. The nurse and Linda did the same. He did this to over 50 women, Holden continued. He charms them right in front of their husbands, takes them away, has sex with them, and then brings them back to face the consequences. He worked it out to perfection. He had different places, different tactics, different approaches to a woman depending on how he studied her. He paused, and he was very good at it. Oh my God! The women looked like they felt sick. You, Linda, Holden said, are one of the few women who got into his car and somehow managed to get back. You managed to break his spell and remember your vows. Then, give me your hand, Linda, Jim demanded. She extended her left hand to him. Tears rolled down her cheeks again, but she smiled, even as she began to sob again. Holden watched as Jim put his wedding ring back on his finger, looking proudly at his wife, and slid the remaining 2 rings onto Linda's finger. What you did, it's just amazing, Holden said, openly admiring it. Mrs. Carlyle. Holden went with Rachel McConnell for the last meeting of the day. He was exhausted and in desperate need of sleep, so Rachel drove the car into a quiet, picturesque suburb. She parked the car in front of the house, and they walked to the door. The woman opened the door for them, looking exhausted and irritated, a painfully familiar expression for any parent dealing with several children under the age of 10 under one roof. Indeed, they heard screams and squeals, as if a dozen children were competing in a race in complete delight, shouting at the top of their voices. Hello, I'm Detective Rachel McConnell, and my colleague is Detective Sergeant George Holden. We're looking for Carl Hendrickson. The woman looked confused and a little worried. Did something happen? No, it's okay, Rachel reassured. We just want to talk to Carl. Is he home? When the man appeared at the door, George was startled. He looked thinner, grayer, with wrinkles under his eyes that spoke of a sharp loss of vitality. He was noticeably smaller compared to his last photos on social media from 2 years ago, where he was carrying Ellen on his back at an event. They both smiled widely, seemed happy and still in love. Although he did not look as broken as his ex-wife, he clearly suffered greatly. However, he was still a big man, strong. Carl Hendrickson only had an associate's degree, but was a master electrician with electrical certification, the latter skills he learned almost on his own. He has done wiring and networking for commercial buildings, homes, schools, and the homes of the rich and famous. This allowed him to earn 6 figures annually, and the significant number was rarely 1, which explained how he was able to simply leave the house he shared with Ellen to her. This hit his finances, but he could recover in 3 years. As Rachel McConnell told a devastated Ellen herself, his generosity was actually cruelty. He wanted to break all ties with her, so he left her the house and all the memories associated with it. Yes, it's me, Carl Hendrickson, he said. How can I help? Rachel reintroduced them both. Can we talk somewhere alone? In silence. In the midst of the war between Hendrickson and Levinson. He grinned. Come in. What's the matter? Carl asked, leading them into his office, past the living room, where 2 teams of screaming children were building forts. You better sit down, sir, Holden said. Holden and McConnell sat together on the large couch as Hendrickson pointed to a small refrigerator next to the TV stand. Would you like something to drink? Water, juice, soda? He shrugged. I would offer beer, but you're on duty, and I don't drink alcohol anymore. Holden and McConnell glanced at each other quickly. So much damage was done. No, thank you, McConnell replied. Carl sat down in a chair. I assume you're here because of Mark Lavaliere. You want to ask if I was involved. Pain flashed across his face, which was immediately replaced by rage. I wasn't, but I can say that I would like to be. McConnell shook her head. No, we came to talk about Ellen. Pain again, deep, sharp. It's not my problem, and if you call that name again, you will have to leave. Holden and McConnell looked at each other again. Then Holden took the floor. She attacked Lavalier. Your son's baseball bat. Carl's mouth opened and his eyes widened in surprise. What? She broke a lot of his bones before passers-by could stop her, Holden said. He may retain some of his appearance, although not all his teeth, but his sports career is over. Carl Hendrickson looked confused and shocked as he looked at both of them. Is this some kind of sick joke? Holden shook his head. No joke. She's in our private holding cell. This will be in the news soon. The department is going to hold a press conference. It's a miracle this hasn't come up yet. Glad he got hurt. But there is some kind of mistake here. Ellen wouldn't hurt a fly, Carl insisted, especially the one she called the man of her dreams. Rachel shook her head, sad. There is no mistake. Witnesses, forensic evidence, everything points to her. She met Carl's gaze. And Lavalier was never the man of her dreams, sir. This person is you. Still, always. I think you should leave my house. Sir, do you know what she did to me? How did she humiliate me? How did she destroy me? Carl's scream echoed in the room. She told them, between sobs and primal screams of pain, how Carl was invited to the opening of a new building of the hospital, which he connected to the power grid with his team. The Sharks financed half of the project, and the entire team came to the gala, including Mark Lavalier, who appeared shirtless and scowling on the team's calendars every year. The man her husband was rooting for on TV, a man who has appeared on countless lists of allowed cheating and one chance in women's magazines. From the moment they met, he focused all his attention on her, stopping one dance after another, even one with her husband. He told her that she was the most beautiful woman in the room, that it was impossible to believe that she had given birth to 3 children. He was an excellent dancer, easily making her graceful as he pushed her farther and farther away from where her husband sat, increasingly embarrassed, angry, and humiliated. She didn't notice it, or didn't understand. But she noticed how delicious it sounded when the one Mark Lavalier, one of the 10 sexiest men in all of sports leagues, said she was beautiful. When real supermodels were present in the evening, younger, slimmer, fitter. Then the dancing slowed down and she lost herself in his arms, feeling him tense against her. The realization that she was arousing Mark Lavalier seemed to cloud her mind. She didn't remember how she ended up on the balcony of the landing, where he hugged her, talked about the constellations, impressing her with his knowledge, and whispered tender words in her ear. When he told her that he wanted her, confirming his words with how hard he pressed against her back, she wanted to object, to stop him. But he kissed her, and everything changed. She kissed Mark Lavalier, the fantasy of millions of women. 15 minutes later, she found herself in the penthouse, naked, in the abyss of an endless series of pleasures under Mark Lavalier. She hated to admit that he was a great lover, but she had forgotten most of the details. Her life fell apart after that night. Holden saw the notes in her file, saw her nervousness and excitement as she sneaked towards Lavalier's car, seen as he held her rings up to the camera before kissing her fingers, making her shiver. I saw how he touched her every time she tried to come to her senses. Ellen needed a moment to think, to evaluate the situation, and perhaps she would have saved herself. But Lavalier did not give her this moment. He gave her a moment, a few even, when he drove her home. Holden watched as her initial delight at this whirlwind adventure, her moment out of time, turned into realization, alarm, shock, horror, and pure despair at what she had done. Her husband returned home without her, knowing full well that she had spent the night in bed with another man. When they arrived at the house, she was sobbing, trembling with horror, moaning her husband's name, her eyes directed forward. Carl Hendrickson was waiting outside when his wife returned home. Lavalier leaned over and kissed her, thanking her for a beautiful night. Something snapped in Holden when Ellen smiled at Lavalier, seeking comfort before facing what she knew was her life going downhill. Seeing the tears in McConnell's eyes, he realized he was not alone. In the present, Holden was trying to deal with Carl Hendrickson's justified anger. Sir, I can't even imagine how you felt. How deeply this hurt you. No, you can't, Hendrickson growled. I would die 1,000 times for this woman. I loved her more and more with every second we were together. We had a family, and she threw it all away on. To whom? Sir, I need you to listen. I'm not trying to justify her actions. To be clear, she's not trying either. She fully accepts responsibility for what she did to you, your marriage, your family. She told everything. Why are you here? Carl asked coldly. This is an unofficial visit, right? The officers exchanged glances. No, unofficial, Holden replied. We're here because she needs your support. McConnell began. Another roar. No. McConnell leaned forward. It's destroyed, Mr. Hendrickson. Broken. Ever since she lost you, yes, through her betrayal, she has been falling apart. She can't cope. She can't move on. She hates herself. The only reason she's alive is because of your children. Because you told her not to die. He blinked when he heard this. What about her parents, her brother and sister? McConnell threw up her hands helplessly. You are the closest person. And honestly, you are the one she needs. Holden took out the tablet following his hunch. It was cruel, but he saw how the man closed himself. This is the woman we have in our cell now, Mr. Hendrickson. Holden showed Hendrickson a photograph of his ex-wife. The effect turned out to be what he expected, and more. Oh Lord, Carl Hendrickson put his hand to his mouth, his eyes bulging as he saw his ex-wife's face for the first time in so many years. Then he started crying. The other thing we have to tell you, Holden continued after Carl Hendrickson had calmed down a bit, is that she's not the first Mark Lavalier has targeted. It is the 27th. Yes, she made her own decisions, but he hit her like a freight train. Carl looked at him, perplexed. What are you talking about? She is the 27th woman whose life and home were destroyed by Mark Lavalier. He purposefully selects married women and records them. They took the time to explain Carl Lavalier's idea of trophy hunting and how successful he was at it. Now, already involved in what was happening, Carl agreed to keep everything secret while he was told about the cameras in Lavalier's cars and the almost complete certainty that similar systems were installed in his other properties. He never brought women into his real home. McConnell took it upon herself to check the fate of women from numbers 1 to 53. It took her a moment to calm down and stop crying as the scale of the destruction became clear. 11 women attempted suicide, including number 53. 3 of them did so. 7 husbands also attempted suicide. 4 of them were successful. Some men simply disappeared, abandoning their unfaithful wives and children. 45 divorces, 3 cases are still pending. Suddenly, the lives of broken families and their children came under police scrutiny. There were more cases of alcoholism, drunk driving, job loss, absenteeism from school, and financial and psychological ruin. 2 women found themselves homeless, and 1 ended up engaging in sexual services for money to get out of her situation. A year ago, a boy who was described by all his teachers as the kindest kid was found with a fully loaded gun and a hit list in his backpack several months after his father left home. His mother was number 25. Finally, when they realized Carl was ready, they showed him a video of Mark driving Ellen home. She ran out of the car twice to throw up, Mark stopping and comforting her as she leaned out the door, emptying the contents of her stomach. When she finally stepped out of the Mercedes to meet her fate, Holden saw that Carl Hendrickson was equally struck by the smile Lavalier threw at the dashboard camera and the satisfied 27, he said out loud. Now they showed Carl a video of Ellen in the cell, where she screamed that it was all her fault, swayed on the floor, called for her husband, and cried inconsolably. This is me. I ruined everything. Something like that. Incredible. So beautiful. I was so happy. He was mine. I loved him, and I betrayed him. Oh my God, Carl, it was me. His need for sleep was such that McConnell insisted on taking him straight home from Carl Hendrickson's house. She annoyed him even more, insisting on walking him to the door and telling his wife Tanya and 18-year-old daughter Tony that he had to go to bed and no excuses would be accepted. Your husband did a good thing today, a real good thing, Tanya, said Rachel, looking at him with a hint of admiration. And now he needs to sleep. Yes, Dad. Tony put her hands on her hips. It's time to sleep. In front of 3 grinning women, he gave up and went upstairs to the shower. Tanya, undressing, joined him, insisting on soaping and washing him herself, because he was clearly too tired to do it properly. To his disappointment, she didn't allow him to go any further. She simply lay in bed with him, wearing only a t-shirt, his head resting on her chest. She promised that he could have it all later that night when he was rested. George Holden was almost dozing off when he forced himself to wake up, just as he had done in the Marine Corps, deciding to immediately discuss what had been bothering him since he saw the first videos of Lavalier crashing a Maserati. Tanya, yes, dear, we need to talk about something I heard. This can't wait, she asked softly. You need to rest. No, it can't. Hearing his tone, her hand froze. What happened? George sat down. Do you think I'm a good person? A person with principles, with qualities? Respectable? Yes, Tanya answered without hesitation. Yes, for every question. I wouldn't be with you if you weren't like this. She looked at him with curiosity and concern. Why are you asking? 3 years ago, said George, we had that summer picnic. I went upstairs to get something and accidentally overheard your conversation with the girls. Tanya called her best friends girls, 3 women her age, all married, with children, whom she met and became close to more than 10 years ago. One of them was married to a fellow police officer from another department. What were we talking about? You talked about your list of permitted relationships, or as Patty and Kira called it, your list of fantastic nights with epic sex. Come on, George, Tanya said with a smile, raising her eyebrows in slight surprise. This is just girl talk. We're not serious. I know, George answered. I'm sure none of you took it seriously back then. He recalled loud laughter as the women rattled off the names of famous people, from politicians to actors to sports stars, both modern and past. What if you actually meet Tyler James and he asks you to spend the night with him? Asked Kiara. Valerie spoke first. I would say, yes. Laughter. What if it happens with Matt? Kiara insisted. I would tell Matt that he knows how much I love him and that I will always come back to him. But I won't miss this opportunity, and we'll see you tomorrow, Valerie answered, warming up. More laughter. And to be honest, Tanya said thoughtfully, could you do this? Just go and sleep with someone because he's on your fantasy list. Patty chimed in. Listen, I love Ben and I wouldn't trade him for anything. Tyler James doesn't mean anything to me, never will, and he probably won't even remember my name the next morning. But spending one night with him, just one night out of our entire marriage, would be an event that I would remember for the rest of my life. This has nothing to do with my feelings for Ben. Holden recounted what Valerie and Patty said. I can't believe you remembered all this, Tanya said, still smiling and looking at him strangely. It's just girl talk, honey, nothing more. Men have fantasy lists like that too, right? Yes, admitted George. But the thing is what Valerie said later. After one hot night with Tyler James, I will go home to the man I love, and everything will be the same, Valerie insisted. She paused. And he'll get a super hot version of me to make him feel better. 3 treats a day, Patty said. It will work. I know my man. More laughter. I want you to understand something, Tanya. And your friends too, Holden said seriously, looking into his wife's eyes. That's not how the male mind works. No self-respecting man, no man of dignity, no man worthy of respect would ever accept this. It will never, ever be same as before. That would be the end. Tanya was silent, looking at him in bewilderment. Fear flashed in her eyes. Do you understand me? Yes, Tanya answered quietly. Fine. He laid his head on her chest, and after a minute, she hugged him again. She felt him relax, his breathing slow, but she knew he was not asleep yet, at least alert enough to hear her. Cute? She asked almost in a whisper. Why did you talk about this? It will be shown on the news, he replied, falling asleep, tonight. Rachel McConnell listened to a news conference on the radio about the serious injuries that ended the career of Sharks star tight end Mark Lavaliere. The chief of police spoke, then the medical team from St. Martin's Hospital, then the Sharks management. Yes, the suspect has been detained. She was caught at the crime scene. Yes, the suspect is a woman. Is this the one he left Morrison with? Is it true that she is married? Was her husband involved? She sighed heavily as she pulled up to her house, tired and anxious. She was glad to see Ellis's car, knowing that he was waiting for her with hot chocolate and would definitely touch her, for now, only a barely noticeable tummy. She loved her husband. George introduced them 3 years ago at a summer picnic. Ellis was now a security consultant, but he and George had previously served in the same platoon until he was pulled out after a firefight and a near explosion of a homemade bomb. For this, he received a Purple Heart. At first, she was disappointed when he appeared, leaning on a cane, to cross the lawn and approach her and George. But then he smiled and made a dirty joke. She laughed. George rudely found an excuse to leave. 20 minutes later, she was twirling her hair on her finger and giggling like a teenager. After 3 weeks, he proved that he didn't need a knee to get her to scratch the sheets and scream in ecstasy. After 2 months, she spent almost every night at his house. 7 months after their first meeting, they got married. She was worried because she had a fantasy list this morning. Something she giggled about with her friends. She never thought she'd meet Tyler James, Brandon Keenan, or Mark Lavaliere. As a lifelong Sharks fan, this charming tight end was on her list. But after everything that had happened that day, when she drove George home, before he got out of the car, he smiled wryly and asked, "Well, do you have a fantasy list?" She answered truthfully, "No, hell no." Jim was eventually able to forgive Jason and Sarah, as well as Paul and Helen, who were at the Morrison. But their relationship was never the same again. Like Dave on March 1st, the men claimed they had no idea that Dee's loud announcement about going to the toilet was actually an excuse to allow Linda to escape, even when Dee came back alone. At first, everyone repeated Dave's reasons, trying to minimize Linda's action. They didn't want Jim to divorce Linda because they were an ideal couple, they had 2 beautiful children, and so on. However, each of them admitted that they would never accept such things from their own wives. With women, the situation was different. They knew or strongly suspected that Linda was up to something, especially when she gave the sign to Dee. When only Dee returned, it immediately became clear to everyone. Their reaction and attempt not only to minimize, but also to justify Linda's decision to run away for the night to have sex with a man on their shared one-night stand list was hard for their husbands to process. Considering how heavily the Sharks advertised themselves, making Mark Lavaliere the center of attention, his grim face and shirtless or tank top adorning billboards all over town, he was the figure of most women's acceptable cheating fantasies. It would just be one night of adventure to be with Mark Lavaliere, Tyler James. Why should this be such a problem? Why are men willing to ruin long-term relationships, devoted women, and happy homes over one-night stand? Why don't they just accept it and move on with their lives? Jim left it to the men to dissuade their wives from this misconception. His wife realized the mistake, albeit later than he would have liked, but long before it was too late, and in circumstances where most other women would have failed. Phil and Jane Braddock made great efforts to restore their friendship, and they succeeded. Jane resolutely came to the hospital every day while Linda was recovering. She sincerely apologized to Jim for the scenario with the model from Sports Illustrated, which she tried to use as an excuse for Linda. Living just 15 minutes away, Jane went ahead and cooked for 2 families at once for a month after Linda returned home, an event documented by the paparazzi. Loyal No, 54 has returned home, read one headline. Jim didn't need to be told outright that the Lavaliere car video leaks were orchestrated by George Holden, as well as searches on some strange, vague charges all authorized by Judge Raymond Martinez, who, as it turns out, served in the same Marine unit as Holden at various properties of the Shark Star. The camera systems were discovered and the video library was deleted. The video of Lavalier raising his ring-clad left hand toward the camera and smiling as he announced the number of his latest conquered victim into the dashboard camera was more than enough to cause him to lose all public and institutional support. More than enough to become the most hated man in the country. Many women's magazines have stopped publishing lists of acceptable infidelity. Jim was sure that they would return sooner or later. Following the revelations, the Sharks immediately removed all posters and canceled all media and promotional material featuring their once beloved tight end. Sponsorship contracts were canceled. The moral turpitude clauses were invoked. His attempt to charge Ellen Jordan resulted in a possible attempted murder charge for pushing Linda Carlisle in front of a truck. So, losing his fortune every day, Lavalier fled the country to an unknown destination as soon as he was able to leave the rehabilitation center, where he spent several months after the attack. An employee at a small private airport recognized him and secretly took a photograph, which he sold to the press. Despite the money spent on operations, Lavalier's face remained disfigured, and his legs still required assistance to walk and probably always would. Jim had never been one to rejoice in the misfortunes of others, but in this case he made an exception. Despite Holden's secret efforts to conceal their identities, many women came forward to identify themselves as Mark Lavalier's victims and admit their responsibility for the destruction of their marriages or lack thereof. Many begged their husbands to return to them. Others have not, having moved on, including one or two who have remarried. Some were simply looking for fame. Several, Jim told Holden, were scammers whom Lavalier never knew and would not touch. To his surprise, Jim maintained his friendship with Dave. Immediately after leaving Linda's room, Dee returned to the apartment she shared with her husband and found him sitting, glass in hand, pensive. She said she no longer wanted anything to do with that smug, hypocritical bitch Linda Carlisle, and now hoped that her pathetic, selfish husband Jim would finally leave his promiscuous wife. She couldn't believe that Linda could actually be mad at her, when all she did was what only a best friend would do, help her escape to spend the night of her life with the man of every woman's dream. How could Jim be so selfish as to deprive his wife of such an opportunity? He should be proud that his wife is so hot that a real man like Mark Lavalier wanted her for at least one night. Dave listened silently to her rant as she took off her coat and shoes. Then he spoke. "I want to divorce Dee. I'm submitting documents on Monday." Di screamed at him, scratched him, threw things, insulted him, shouted out his shortcomings. Seeing that he remained unperturbed, she called him a fool, a blind fool. "I've been sleeping with Frank Glenford for months now. He has sex with me on his desk, and I pleasure him every day. In every way, he is much better and greater than you." Dave took a deep breath when he heard this. Then he simply walked out while she mockingly laughed at him. Later, in the hospital, he told a still furious Jim, who had somehow made peace with Linda, about the end of his marriage. "I really want children, and after yesterday, I simply couldn't even imagine her as the mother of my child." A few weeks later, Dave met Amy, a very nice paralegal from a law firm in the same building where he worked. Even then, he began talking to her about children. As for Di, she had to quit her job along with her boss after Dave sent a recording of her scathing confession to the company's top lawyer and CEO. With such a stain on her reputation, she had to move to another city to continue her career. February had been terrible, Jim thought, but things could have been much worse. "See," said the voice, "I told you so." Linda winced and swayed slightly, and her husband still, by some miracle, her husband frowned with concern and held out his hand to steady her. She still felt pain in her hip as she returned to her normal gait after several weeks with a cane and, before that, crutches. She started going out without a cane just a couple of weeks ago, and the swaying has gradually subsided to almost nothing. Thanks to the latest laser treatments and tilapia skin treatments, the scars have almost disappeared. Almost, except for two, subtle, but noticeable. One is on the inside of one thigh, the other is on the outside of the other. She refused further treatment after the first week. She wanted the scars to remain so that she would always remember. Every time she undresses, every time she feels the tightness of her skin. Jim froze the first time he felt them, the first time they made love again after the accident, and it broke her heart. She cried and begged him to forgive her again. The past months have been difficult, very heavy, enough for her to realize that her belief that Jim would forgive her fantasies about the night with Mark Lavaliere, if it had all gone through, was the epitome of delusion born of lust. Her rationalization that this would only lead to a hard time in their marriage was not just wrong, it was crazy. When she returned from the hospital, she saw Jim, who was trying to help Emma with her physical therapy, and Tommy, who stood like a little guard, guarding his mother's legs. She saw him take care of the children and her without complaint, knowing that he still saw her dancing with Lavaliere, running away with him, kissing him in the car, letting him touch her. And she cried inconsolably for what she had done, for what she had almost lost, sometimes even in front of her worried children. She suspected that their young son and daughter had played a much larger role in her remaining Mrs. Linda Carlyle than anything she had done to finally win her husband back. Seeing her return to sanity and her struggle to return to him only earned him his forgiveness, returned the rings to her fingers. But he couldn't forget so easily, and there was a real chance that they would leave her hand again forever. She realized now that although Jim had forgiven her for almost cheating on her, forgiveness did not mean forgetting those moments when she was ready or simply crazy enough to ruin everything. She didn't need marriage counseling to realize how deeply she had nearly destroyed their relationship that night, the way she had humiliated him. It wasn't just that she almost slept with Lavaliere, or even that she cheated on her husband. It was about how easily she was willing to break something precious, thinking that one night wouldn't change anything. She eventually absolved Dee of all the blame, although she cut her out of her life. Because it was no coincidence that it was Dee, the only one of her friends, who she called to help her leave. The one who openly encouraged the topic of permitted infidelity, the one who herself cheated on her husband. But she didn't need Dee's approval to do what she had already decided to do. She suspected, with a nagging feeling that would never leave her, that only Lavaliere's mistake, his decision to take her to a house in the suburbs, instead of a closer penthouse, had given her conscience time to catch up with her. The fact that she returned without reaching the end, she attributed more to luck and circumstances than to her character, and this did not erase her betrayal of the man who had loved her completely for 10 years. This told her a lot about herself, about her hitherto unconscious sense of superiority and arrogance, about taking for granted what she had. And she didn't like it at all. She knew that there were times when the memories overtook him, and she was frightened by the thought that it was too late, that what she had destroyed could no longer be repaired. His unconditional trust in her was seriously damaged. The fact that she considered Mark Lavaliere more desirable than Jim, even for a second, haunted them both. She couldn't forgive herself for letting it get this far, which was why the nickname given to her by the media after the incident, Loyal No. 54, irritated her so much. The counselor suggested she write letters to Jim to express feelings that were too painful for words. She described in detail her remorse, her love, her understanding of how close she was to losing him, took full responsibility for her actions, begged for forgiveness, and wrote about how, watching Jim with Emma and Tommy, his patience and strength with their children and with her, despite everything, showed her daily what a special person she is. I almost lost it for the sake of empty fantasy. Jim didn't talk about the letters, but they were in his bedside table, and they were wrinkled enough that she knew he'd read them more than once. She also wrote letters to each of their former friends who were at Morrison's that night, strongly condemning their actions and expressing shame and remorse for what they had done. Jane, Helen, and Sarah called her that night, and it was a sobering realization that they hadn't even noticed how much their moral compasses had become distorted. They all, along with their husbands, apologized to Jim, including Dave, who, fortunately, came without Dee. Leaving the hospital after a final checkup that confirmed her legs would be fully restored within a month, She tensed up when she saw a man walking past in a Sharks jersey. From that night on, any mention of the team's name, logo, or other attributes earned Jim a look that spoke of his pain. But this time his gaze passed by without stopping. Instead, he made sure she was steady on her feet after she tripped, and then he leaned down and kissed her. "Be careful, dear. I love you, Jim Carlyle," she said, bursting into tears. He looked at her, embarrassed but pleased. "I love you too. Keep working on it," the voice warned. "I will," Linda thought. Her heart became lighter, and she held her husband's hand, still husband, even if it takes a lifetime. Ellen Jordan received a final hug from a guard as she stood outside a minimum security prison. She was already holding back tears due to the applause and shouts of approval from the other prisoners who accompanied her as she left her cell for the last time. Ironically, the date of her release, September 16th, was the most hated for her. It was on this day 2 years ago that she met Mark Lavaliere and lost everything. Officer Chen was friendly from the start, but in truth, all employees were like that. They followed history, watched the media circus that unfolded when Mark Lavaliere's systematic destruction of women and their families was exposed. Somehow, the videos Lavaliere took in his cars leaked online. The women's faces and names were cleverly blurred. The only images that remained unblurred were the footage of Lavaliere showing off their wedding rings to the camera, smiling creepily and calling out the number every time he dropped the woman off. The only exceptions were a video of Mrs. Linda Carlyle regaining consciousness and trying to escape, and a video of the then Mrs. Ellen Hendrickson depressed and vomiting as she was returned home. After this, Lavaliere looked into the camera and said, 27. Judge Martinez's words at the sentencing made national headlines. While this court cannot endorse lynching, we cannot ignore the fact that the defendant's actions, while illegal, revealed a pattern of deliberate psychological destruction that has destroyed dozens of lives, men, women, and children. Mr. Lavaliere's actions have destroyed more than 50 families. Miss Jordan's attack, fueled by trauma, inadvertently served the greater good. The 6-month sentence in a minimum security prison with mandatory counseling and 2 years probation sparked heated debate. Critics, all of whom were careful to express their sympathy for Ellen Jordan, called it judicial activism. Supporters cited a detailed pre-trial report, Ellen's guilty plea to assault with a weapon, and testimony from forensic psychologists about Lavaliere's methodical predatory tactics. "Remember what you told Jesse last week," Chen said quietly. "That forgiveness is possible, that life goes on." Ellen nodded, although they both knew she couldn't apply those words to herself yet. Therapy helped her understand Lavaliere's predatory patterns, realizing that she was just number 27 in his trophy collection. But understanding does not equal healing. She was starting to heal. She started taking care of herself again and gained some weight. "It's time to follow your advice," said another voice. Ellen turned around to see Officer Reeves approaching halfway through his morning shift. They all came to defend the quiet woman who spent her free time in the library, helping inmates study for JED tests, or using her paralegal expertise to help with legal paperwork. "The kids in the reading program will miss you," Officer Reyes added. Ellen began volunteering with a children's visiting program after noticing that many incarcerated children had difficulty reading. Prison officials made an exception, allowing her to continue even after her own children stopped coming. Her children were another bright spot during this time. They had previously been reluctant to communicate with her, living with her in a house that she no longer shared with their father. Now they threw themselves on her neck and shared their little adventures. Now she listened and communicated with them. As for their father, when she saw him at the hearing, having already decided to admit guilt, her breath stopped. She was afraid to see that exhausted, depressed look with which he met her after the night of betrayal. But he smiled. It was not a smile of victory, nor an expression of satisfaction at her fall. She looked like the one who met her, before she ruined everything. He never came in when he dropped off the kids, but he passed notes with little encouraging messages. He signed them, Ellie, as he used to call her. She took care of each of them. The children told her that their Aunt Sandra, their father's sister, had recently moved from the other side of the country and was now living with them along with their cousins. They also mentioned Aunt Natalie, who came to visit their dad for a few months before Mom was sent to prison for hurting that big bad football player. It hurt to hear, but she didn't blame Carl for seeking comfort and happiness. She wanted him to be happy. Her parents and siblings also came, and finally, she let them in. Her father burst into tears when he saw how thin she had become, which brought tears to her mother and sister. Her brother dramatically vowed not to watch football anymore. After all, he used to adore Marc Lavalier. The priest with whom she sat before Lavalier crashed in front of her also came to see her. McAuliffe's father was shocked to see her picture on TV and used all his connections to see her. This time he not only sat with her, but she also spoke. He told her again that she was not abandoned by God or condemned for giving in to temptation. This brought her comfort, but did not convince her. Through the fence, she saw a whole media circus that had set up camp outside the gates since the morning. The baseball bat attack that ended Lavalier's career made national news, but the revelation of his methodical actions turned Ellen into an unlikely symbol. Many women's organizations supported her. The talk shows discussed the impact of fame and power on people versus women's free will. Ethics teachers used her case in their lectures. She turned down all offers of interviews, writing a book, and adapting the film. The only statement she ever made was in court: "I take full responsibility for my actions." When she stepped out into the sunlight at noon, a little intimidated by the number of journalists outside the gate, she expected to see only her parents and siblings, who had said they would come. But instead, she saw a small group of other people. Detective Sergeant George Holden and Detective Rachel McConnell, now visibly pregnant, stood leaning against a nondescript police car. "Hi, Ellen," Rachel said warmly, walking up to her. George Holden smiled. "I'm very glad to see you free, Ellen." "Hi, Ellen," said Linda Carlisle, also pregnant and no longer needing help to stand upright, next to her husband Jim, who smiled at her. "You look good," Jim said. When they first met, Jim Carlisle looked at her like she was a hero, and he still looked the same. Linda visited Ellen many times, even when she was in a wheelchair, then on crutches, then with a walker, and finally with a cane. They quickly became friends. Linda also received many offers to write a book or make a film. She rejected them all. As she said, she did not want to profit from her weakness after all. She herself got into Lavalier's car, fully intending to betray her vows. She also felt that a film about her and her struggle with conscience would be an unnecessary, cruel, and self-righteous rebuke of the 53 women who succumbed to Lavalier's charms, including Ellen. As she once confessed to Ellen, the only reason she escaped Marc Lavalier's fate was because he made a mistake and took her to an elegant house in one of the most prestigious areas of the city. If he had taken her to his penthouse, which was much closer, like he did with Ellen, he would have had his way. However, loyal no, 54 benefited despite itself. The Sharks paid all of her medical and physical therapy bills, paid off the remainder of the Carlisle's mortgage, and set up educational funds for their children, Emma and Tommy. Ellen's parents then emerged from the minivan parked next to Holden and McConnell's car. Then her 3 children jumped out and ran towards her, screaming. Ellen burst into tears as her family hugged her, joined by her brother and sister. The Levinsons, her former daughter-in-law Sandra, was married to a naval officer who was still deployed, and her children showed up, cheering loudly and joining in her children's delight. However, she never expected what happened next. As her face was buried in her father's neck, she felt a familiar hand on her shoulder, and she heard a voice that she was afraid she would never hear again, warm and almost singing her name in her favorite discordant manner. "Hello, Ellie." She froze. "No," she said. "Yes," said Carl Hendrickson. "Turn around, Ellen." Her father pulled away carefully and smiled, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Turn around, Ellen." She trembled, eyes downcast, still ashamed, still afraid. A moment later, she heard Carl laugh softly, his hand lifting her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. He smiled at her. just like before. It was as if she was again the most precious person in the world to him. "Welcome, Ellie," said Carl. "I missed you. Very." Here is the translation of the text into Russian. Ellen fell to her knees, unable to stand, bursting into tears, but he held her tightly, not letting her fall, repeating that he still loved her. She clung to the man she still loved madly, begging him to forgive her. It wasn't until a full minute later that she realized the noise around them was applause. From her friends and family to the guards who had gathered to watch the reunion outside the prison, and to the men and women of the press who were filming the whole thing. When she finally allowed Carl to release her hands, still muttering apologies, another man approached them. It was Father McAuliffe. "Skip the preface, Father," said Carl. "Just give it back to me. Now." Ellen's mouth opened in surprise, and she began to tremble. "Give him your hand," the priest said, although it was unnecessary because Carl had already taken her left hand. "Do you agree?" McAuliffe asked Carl. "Yes," said Carl, putting 2 rings, a little too big, but still perfect, on her finger. "Agree." McAuliffe turned to Ellen. "And you?" "Oh, Lord," Ellen screamed as her children screamed and jumped around. "Answer the question, Ellie," her brother shouted, causing everyone to laugh. "Yes," she screamed. "Yes, oh Lord, yes, by virtue of the power given to me." Ellen Hendrickson did not hear the rest, did not hear the applause and joyful shouts around her. She heard nothing but Carl, her Carl, telling her again that he loved her before kissing her. September 16th. "I can't believe I just realized this now," Rachel McConnell exclaimed in sudden realization as he drove her home from prison. It was her last working day before maternity leave. George Holden had a great poker face. "You persuaded Martinez to release it today, September 16th, didn't you?" She shook her head, so that she remembers this day as something wonderful and not terrible. George continued driving, ignoring her. Then he said, "Also, and not instead. In my experience, the best way to deal with bad memories is to create good ones right on top of them." He glanced at McConnell. "I talked to this guy a few weeks ago. He called me himself." "Carl?" "Yes. At that time, he was dating some woman. He said she left him when Ellen was sentenced. She told him that he still loved Ellen and that she had suffered enough. In fact, she told him that he should forgive her and bring her back." Holden glanced at McConnell again. "I'm almost sure that's what he wanted himself." "I think you're right," she agreed. Carl Hendrickson's tears, when he saw Ellen's exhausted face, made it clear to both of them that he had erased her from his life, but not from his heart. He chuckled. "It won't be easy for them, but I think they can handle it. It helps." She smiled at him. "You are such a sentimental romantic." He was silent for a moment, then shrugged. "That's probably true, but don't tell anyone. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.